You're off the screen.
All right, good afternoon. It is 1:31 on August 4th, 2020, our MLA's birthday today, for those who might be interested. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order. 6 of us are assembled here. Councillor McGrath is zooming in from elsewhere. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Mr. Furcho?
Thank you, Your Worship. We would like to add an in-camera item to discuss the enforcement provisions of potential face coverings, bylaw, or direction we might receive from council today.
Right, that could be added as agenda item 13.1. Councillor DeMota?
I was just going to ask where administration wanted to have that discussion, whether it was going to be pertinent to our discussion on the bylaw itself, or if that's just something that needs to be discussed.
So I had trouble hearing all of that, but I take it that the request is, depending on how we go with other items of business, there may be a need to discuss enforcement options in camera.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any other additions, deletions, or other changes to today's agenda? If not, then could I have a motion, please, to add to today's agenda item 13.1 an in-camera discussion? Thank you. Councillor Journeau, all in favor? We need to be able to see Councillor McGrath, and she needs to be able to vote.
Mark, can you help me? Like, I need to click on this, but clearly I can't.
Which one?
Well, I need to unmute her camera, but it won't let me.
Oh, I know what it is. This one right here.
I did unmute sound. But...
Oh, right here. That was the other little glitch. No, she just.
There she is. If she speaks, she should be able to.
I see Councillor McGrath now, and I see her hand up. I'm going to assume that's a hand up in favor of the motion. And I see a nod, which I will interpret also. All right, so that motion is carried. Can I have a motion then to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Keller-Herenthy, thank you. All in favor? Councillor McGrath included. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of July 21st have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve those minutes as circulated? Councillor Journeau, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have no presentations listed on our agenda. Mr. Furcho, no change there. There are no presentations.
That's correct.
Is there any business arising from the minutes of July 21st? It appears not. Agenda item 6, department reports. We have nothing scheduled and nothing has changed there, Mr. Furcho.
That's correct, Your Worship. This schedule as strong.
Agenda item 7 then, information updates. 7.1 compulsory face covering options. Mr. Furcho, through you to Ms. Nadon, I think is presenting on that.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. There are a few options in front of council today. So as indicated in the report, after last Tuesday, the administration had received directives to start drafting a bylaw and look at mandatory clauses and items like that. And then over the course of the last week, there were several events in other communities and also here locally, but that sort of prompted us to explore a bit more quickly what options would be available to council in order to make face coverings mandatory in Jasper. And as you see presented in the agenda package, there are, well, three options, one being keeping the status quo. The second option being using the conducting public places bylaw, which is already in place, and making some determinations by motion to direct administration to start enforcing some of those provisions, which essentially would suggest that not wearing a mask would be considered endangering the public health, which is already a clause in that bylaw. So in a nutshell, this bylaw with direction from council will allow administration to start enforcing on public lands or on municipally owned and operated facilities. And that would include sidewalks, roadways, green spaces. That's all the places, the definition of public place that is covered under the conduct in public places bylaw. And I'm sure we'll get into some more discussions and questions. And the other item that is next on the agenda, but that is considered in this information report, is a new bylaw, which is called, as it's proposed, a temporary compulsory face covering bylaw. And that would be the avenue if council wishes to make face coverings compulsory in all public places, including privately owned public places, such as businesses in Jasper, including, and not limited to, but restaurants, retail, grocery stores. So the policy decision in front of council today is to make a determination as to whether compulsory face coverings would be appropriate in our community, but also where in public places that are owned by the municipality only, or if it should also apply to businesses. And we do have a discussion about enforcement that administration is suggesting, as outlined in the report, that could be had in camera under the provisions that are presented here. So regardless of which way council goes, we would like to discuss how councillors would like to see this happen on the ground and some clarifications. And we have some leads here, but we feel like that is a conversation that we can have in camera and then communicate it with the public later once those discussions has been had. So that is our presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Don. And just to add a bit to the report, first I want to thank administration and Ms. Nadon in particular for her efforts on this. The intent of the two options, or the two streams, is multifaceted. Firstly, we have an existing bylaw which we can probably use for outdoor public places that are under the control of the municipality, but that would exclude private indoor public places. The benefit of that initially was seen as the opportunity for council simply to act by motion rather than by bylaw. Unlike any other jurisdiction in the nation, we cannot finally pass a bylaw without certification from Parks Canada that our bylaw does not encroach into federal territory or federal jurisdiction. Even Banff is different in that regard. So there was some concern about how quickly we could put a bylaw in place, although I'm happy to report that I've had discussions with the superintendent and he understands our challenges and he has committed to make himself available today. So if we get through second reading of a bylaw, we can take a short break. He is standing by to provide certification so we could proceed if we unanimously agree to do so to the third reading today. All of that was unknown when this work was being done last week. So that's why it comes in two pieces as it does. But I certainly want to extend credit to Parks Canada and the superintendent for being so readily available today to make this work if we go by way of 2 reading certification and then 3rd reading of a bylaw. The bylaw would apply to, as I say, indoor public places, which are essentially privately controlled, not under the control and management of the municipality. Hence the 2 approaches. But again, thanks to administration for pushing this through as events began to overtake us in the last week or so. Questions for Ms. Dodon regarding the report? Councillor Demoda?
Not a question, but a comment, Mr. Mayor, through to Ms. Nadal and administration. Thank you very much for expediting and getting all that work done before the weekend, including with you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the material that we have here and the thought and the process that's gone behind it. So I commend you both for that.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd like to echo also thanks. I know to administration and to yourself. I know a lot of work has been done here, and it's probably appropriate that it is appropriate that we debate the motion and the bylaw as separate issues because they are separate legislations. However, I'd like to just say at this point that I am in favor of the 2-pronged approach. I like the idea of using our existing conduct in public places bylaw. Because when I stop to think about it, I feel like this is exactly the sort of scenario that bylaw was written for. It's written in open enough terms to allow it to apply to a situation that hadn't really been foreseen to that at the time that bylaw was written. But now we are faced with a scenario where it is appropriate in public places for public protection to wear a mask, and so it's ideal. So we will talk about each of those, about the bylaw and the motion. But as to the concept of using those the existing bylaw and a new bylaw to address indoor spaces, that's great thinking, and congratulations to all. So, came up with that.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Yes, I would like to echo the statements from Councillor Demoda and Councillor Butler with their gratitude to administration, specifically to Ms. Nadon, and to you, Mayor Ireland. I know you worked tirelessly overnight to make this happen, so thank you very much for the swift action this week in response to community health.
Well, nothing has happened yet. And if nobody else is prepared to make the motion, I am quite prepared to cede the chair to Deputy Mayor Journeau and make the motion myself, and then I can speak to the thoughts behind it, and we can debate the motion. So we're dealing with item 7.1. And Mayor Ireland, you wish to make a motion? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Journeau. So I would in fact like to present this as a motion, the motion being that Council hereby directs administration that for the purposes of section 3.6 of the Conduct in Public Places bylaw, being bylaw number 70, commencing August 5th, 2020 and until further motion of council, failing to wear a face covering on the public sidewalk on the west side of Connaught between Aspen Avenue and Hazel Avenue, and on any public sidewalks on Patricia Street between Pyramid Lake Road and Hazel Avenue at any time, or elsewhere in public places in the town of Jasper when 2 meters of physical distance cannot be maintained shall be deemed to be an action or behavior which endangers or detracts from the comfort, repose, health, peace, or safety of persons within the limits of the town shall be an offense and shall be subject to the penalties specified herein. The intent, just for clarity for the public, is that to the extent that we control outdoor public places, our sidewalks are much like beaches in beach communities, and we have an obligation, I think, to protect our residents, our visitors, and our local economy from an outbreak of COVID-19. Our sidewalks are not designed at the best of times for the free flow of traffic, and particularly with the pinch points that now exist and are structurally impossible to change. Physical distancing in many places simply is not possible, and we have to guard against that. What the motion proposes is that along the one side of Connaught, so the business side and not the railway side, from the corner of Aspen, which is the east or northern end of the Crimson Hotel, down to Hazel, where the lights are at the corner by the level railway crossing. All of that would be restricted, but the other side of the sidewalk on Connaught would not be. And public sidewalks on Patricia Street from Hazel back down to Pyramid Lake Road, which is the corner of the Jasper Downtown Hostel. Face masks would be required. Intentionally, other public places within that zone are not included. If people can maintain 2 meters of physical distancing in the parks, for example, they should be able to go there and have their ice cream cone, which they couldn't do on the sidewalk, in parking lots and other public areas. They would not be so restricted, but in the remainder of the town, the restriction would simply be, if you can maintain 2 meters of physical distance, you're fine, but otherwise, masks are compulsory. And it is without question, a public safety issue for residents and for visitors, and as I say, for local business. So that's the intent of the motion. I welcome debate on it. Certainly it can be changed, but that was the intention behind it.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, for the presentation of the motion and the commentary that followed. Comments, questions? Councillor Demota.
Well, I think this is a very intelligent approach, and again, I thank you for thinking this, and it's just so simple and it makes sense. You know, I watched the Banff Council go through their debate and their meetings through doing their public masking, mandatory masking, and Mayor Sorensen reminded me of like the 3 filters to take into consideration. You know, in the process that she goes through in her mind when she's making a decision, and I like to think that I do the same. So, does this benefit the community as a whole? I think it does. What are the costs? So not just the fiscal costs, but what are the ramifications of doing this or not doing it? So I think moving forward with this, I think that we could alleviate a lot of costs in as far as the health of our community goes, and I think that's number 1. And number 3, is it the right thing to do? And I believe it is the right thing to do. So having thought of those 3 filters, I'm feeling really comfortable, and I'm glad I took the time to watch that, and I commend them for moving forward on this. Now, as far as the details go on this, one point that I thought were the connecting streets between the 2 major areas in town, Kitzer and Connaught and Patricia. And I know that I had a discussion with the mayor earlier today, and we talked about, you know, Hazel Street going up on the side of the street there. But, you know, there's also the connector between the 2 streets where there isn't a street, but it's the municipal byway that goes from next to where we have the spice joint. there, which is a popular walkway, as well as Mayette, on this, adjacent to the Whistler's Inn, and across from and even the walkway in front of the Central Park. And then there's Pyramid Lake Road on the other side too. There's some popular spots there where there's a lot of human traffic. So how do we incorporate those into this bylaw? And can we just name them? And all the side streets connecting, whether it be Hazel, the walkway between Mayette Avenue and Pyramid Lake Road.
Question from Councillor Demota. Any comments? My comment would be I agree that they should be included. It's part of the block. It's part of the area that is the congested area. Ms. Nadon.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Perhaps just changing the motion and say the Central Business District might take care of the concerns there. And I think what difference it will make is with regards to enforcement. So to provide clear directions for the public to follow, but also for our bylaw staff to understand clearly what's at stake. I think what was different in the motion was Aspen Avenue is further than what is considered to be usually the Central Business District. So perhaps an adjustment needed there, but instead of saying Patricia Street sidewalks, if we just said Commercial Business District, it would encompass all of downtown, in my opinion.
Councillor Demota.
I would have a friendly amendment to that thought, because I think that does make sense. So Central Business District, but then including the west side sidewalk from Aspen to Pyramid Lake Road, because that does cover, as was pointed out, the other grocery store in town, because there are lineups there. And I think that there have been some social distancing issues. I believe that the people at the Crimson Hotel have done a good job in their areas, but there's still a sidewalk, busy sidewalk there, and I think that should be considered as well. So I'm not sure if I'm to make the amendment, or if council's thinking that should be considered.
I'd like to raise a point here. I think if you Central Business District, right now we don't have 2 gas stations. We have 2 included, we have 2 excluded. So I think we should clarify that the Central Business District include the Esso and the Petro-Canada and the 700 block. They should, but right now they don't. So if we're going to make some amendments here, we should make some amendments that are clear for everybody, and us and the enforcement people. Mr. Furcho first, then Mayor Arlen.
Your Worship and our Deputy Mayor, just in terms of clarity for communicating a bylaw for both the public and for our enforcement staff, having a sort of simply defined area would be helpful. And then the second bullet, where any other area where social distancing becomes problematic, is sort of that catch-all. I just get a little concerned when we start adding pieces and parts to the geographic description, that it becomes something that a member of the public coming in from out of town simply won't understand. So a simple defined area, and then adding the catch-all phrase of any other area where commuter distancing is problematic, takes care of all of those other parts and pieces, rather than a very difficult to convey geographic description. It's my one comment.
Thank you for that, Mr. Furcho. Looks like the nod of heads appear to be welcoming that. Mayor Arlen, you had a comment.
I only wanted to say that although I missed the connecting streets, Mayette in particular and Hazel, I chose not to proceed by district, primarily because I didn't want to capture all of the district. I think we have an obligation to enforce on public sidewalks where people are bumping into each other and there is just no opportunity for physical distancing. But I wanted to give people an opportunity as well. Lots of people take out food or drinks or ice cream or whatever. They should be given some opportunity and some place to indulge in that. And so parks and open areas that aren't sidewalks, provide a better opportunity for social distancing and physical distancing than the sidewalks themselves. So to approach it from an entire district means everywhere in the district, I think, and that's why I sought to restrict it to sidewalks where I think the issue is most paramount. And it could be described in other ways. It could be described as sidewalks in the central business district. But I realistically, on the one side of Connaught Drive, without any businesses, it's unlikely to be as problematic. That's part of the town trail. It has a slightly different use. I did not see that. It was quite the same, but that would be an area where you would be required to wear a face covering if you cannot maintain physical distancing. But otherwise, you might be able to traverse that sidewalk without running into problems. So that's just an explanation of why I was focused on sidewalks rather than the district.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Well, I was quickly swayed to the simplicity of Central Business District, but I'm sure that Mayor Ireland had worked through all of the all the ins and outs of what's going to encompass this the most. And of course, it's nice and easy to say it's Central Business District, although, like Mayor Ireland just said, the south side of Connaught, well, that should be, if you're able to maintain physical distance, I don't think masks should be needed at that point. So I'm in favor of sticking with Mayor Ireland's wording. Maybe a few additional cross streets, such as Councillor Demota had suggested, but I think what we definitely do want to keep in mind is the simplicity of it, and do people understand? Can we find the right wording to get our message across to our community as well as our visitors? And I think we've got that simplicity is key.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota, please.
Thanks for acknowledging me. I'm just considering this motion here and then what we have to consider later. So if we're considering something that's indoor later, like particularly a restaurant, in order to eat something, you have to take your mask off, or to consume something, you have to take your mask off. So how far down do we want to go with this? I want to keep it simple. So if somebody gets an ice cream and they're standing there with their family or their significant other by themselves and they want to eat something and they're standing there or walking, and how do we patrol that? Like, how do you want to patrol that? If it's in the downtown core, if you walk across in front of the park's information building there and you want to sit on the grass, take your mask off to eat a sandwich or whatever it is, I don't think that, we should be asking people to have their faces covered all the time. So I think, I don't know how you address that in here, but there has to be some flexibility there. And if we go with the simplistic rule, then we're going to have that idea of intention. I'm walking down the street and I need to take my mask off to have a sip of water. Am I contravening the bylaw? I don't think so. So I think keeping it simple is it's common sense.
Councillor Wilson.
I think in response to that, Maryland's motion is pretty clear that sidewalks, they're kind of thoroughfares, and I don't think it's a necessity to be drinking and eating on the sidewalk. You can find those places like public parks, benches, etc., off the thoroughfare of the sidewalks, which are as narrow enough as it is now. We don't need people consuming on those on the thoroughfare. So find a little enclave of serenity and indulge, but I don't think we need to do it on the sidewalks, and I think that's pretty straightforward. Just in my opinion.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butler.
Just from what thank you, from listening to all these points of view, I think it would be sensible to include the cross streets in our definition. And so that's 2 blocks of Hazel Avenue, 2 blocks of Marietta Avenue. It's probably 2 blocks of Pyramid Lake Road and 1 block of Aspen Avenue, Balsam Avenue. And then I think we can say, and all public sidewalks enclosed within that area, which would kind of capture that little piece that we talked about that used to be a street and is now kind of a sidewalk, which is pretty heavily populated. I don't really like the idea of leaving that out. It does what Councillor Wilson would just be saying. That really, if you're on the sidewalks in these areas, have a mask on. And I think it would be, well, it would be quite a lot more words. It really is quite simple and it would get it done. And the other point I wanted to raise is that in respect of enforcement, and I know we're going to talk about enforcement where we should in camera, but you know, enforcement around, I don't know, somebody eating an ice cream cone on a public sidewalk in the downtown core, and that person isn't near other people. I'm not worried about overly enthusiastic enforcement in those scenarios. I think it's okay that we say, look, have a mask on when you're on the sidewalks. But if somebody moves it for a moment to ice cream, that is really the same scenario that pertains in all restaurants all the time. And I think people get that. And I'm not too worried about finding ourselves in a scenario where any enforcement personnel would be seeing that as something that needed to be acted on. So I think in that respect, we can keep it simple. So I'd say name the side streets, say other public sidewalks in there within that area, and I think it does what we need to do.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Is administration clear on Ms. Neto?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think the only clarification I'd like to bring forward is that we're talking about a motion here to set direction for administration. As long as we are clear, well, and for the public, of course, as long as that's clear, which I do believe it is, subject to the edits that were just discussed. But how we communicate it with the public will not be as complex. So keeping in mind that what is required to get a good legislative process underway is one thing. How we communicate it to the public is another. Obviously, they need to match, but we can work with that direction, and we'll find wording that makes it easy for people to understand. And I think the distinction between sidewalks and other areas like parks or places like that will help ensuring the public understands what the goal is here. So yes, this works for us. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Demota.
Okay, so for me, what's the harm in saying all sidewalks in the commercial district of Jasper? So then, because people don't know the name of the streets. And then that, if people need to go in the park or off the sidewalk, then you're not on the sidewalk. And to me, if you're going to keep it simple, that's the best way to go. And I think that's the confusion I was having earlier. So that's just my idea or my perception of it. So council's.
So again,
I'm proposing that all sidewalks in the downtown core, because I think even across the street on both sides of Connaught, regardless of where you are, there's still some congestion. There's public washrooms on one side. There's lots of parking lots where people are getting in and out of vehicles, and there's people. I think it makes sense to me just to cover all sidewalks in the commercial core. So if that includes all sidewalks from Hazel to Pyramid Lake Road, however you make it, that covers the little gaps. You don't have to name the streets.
Councillor Kelleher, MP.
I'm fairly easy with this. I like to keep it simple. Or the other side of Connaught, we're connected to the town trail. And I see what you mean, right across the traffic light, sometimes it's congested there. But then from the train station down, there's nobody most of the time. And people like to walk along there. I would hate to see them have to wear a mask if they don't have to. We already have, if you're 2 meters physical distancing, be 2 meters physical distancing. I think it's really about the downtown core we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, let's just keep it simple.
Talk about 100 meters.
Yeah. You know, the important thing is we bring it in, we get it going, we get it out there, and as I am sure our bylaw will use common sense. If somebody takes off their mask to take a drink and put it back on again, somebody is eating an ice cream. I don't think bylaw is going to, they'll use their heads in those cases. You know what I mean? Like, you will see, today I saw a whole family of 5 people, one without a mask. Maybe they have a problem. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to be able to control everything. And I think just keep it simple.
I hear the comment trying to keep it simple, but in our debate, we're bringing up some things to make it complicated. Yes, let's keep it simple. Sidewalks in the downtown business district, correct? Is that how administration, I mean, you're the ones that have to deal with it from here on in. Comments, feedback, no? Councilor Demoto.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's your motion, so I'd like to make a friendly amendment. Does that work? I would like to amend, taking the specifics or making it. So all public sidewalks in the commercial core, and it'll take away, so just say all sidewalks in the commercial core of Connaught between Aspen Avenue and Pyramid Lake Road. On or between.
Aspen to Pyramid Lake Road. No, you want Aspen to Hazel.
Sorry, I'm just reading it out here. Okay, right now it says on the west side of Connaught between Aspen Avenue and Hazel Avenue, right, and the public sidewalks on Patricia streets between Pyramid Lake Road and Hazel Avenue at any time. So on all public sidewalks on the west side of Connaught between Pyramid Lake Road and Hazel Avenue. No, I'm just down. All sidewalks in the commercial core, downtown commercial core. Can you help clarify that for me?
I appreciate that any motion, my motion, subject to all sorts of amendment, but I would argue that we don't all clearly know what we're talking about when we say interchangeably the central business district and the downtown core, which is why I chose to define it by street. I would think that I did miss, as I acknowledged, the interconnecting sidewalks, but I would welcome a friendly amendment that said on the west side of Connaught between Aspen Avenue and Hazel Avenue, and on any public sidewalks on Patricia Street between Pyramid Lake Road and Hazel Avenue, and on all connecting sidewalks, but leave it defined by those parameters rather than throw in other terminology where there's not a clear direction. But I do think it should be restricted to sidewalks in that defined area, and I don't think that that's defined as the central business district, and I don't think it's necessarily defined as the core or whatever other term was put out. But it's a defined area, it's clear. So if that is the nature of your proposed friendly amendment, I would accept that.
Well, I appreciate you clarified, because as I was reading it through, I had an idea in my head of what I wanted to say, and then when I was reading it, I was unclear as it was coming out as well. So I'm cool with that. I'm fine.
Thank you for that. The intent is sidewalks and not the whole public area. Correct? Councilor Butler, did you? Oh, I thought. Councilor Wilson.
Well, before Mayor Ireland had spoke up, I was going to say that he had put a a hefty amount of time and work into his motion, and I am glad nobody else spoke and took the motion from him. Glad he succeeded the chair and put the motion forward himself. I think he spent a lot of time on this, and a lot of work went into it. And I think that who better to put the public safety motion forward than the mayor himself. I'd like to stick with his wording as closely as possible, but, you know, a few additional amendments such as was just presented by Mayor Ireland, I would support.
Thank you for that. Thumbs up, show of hands. All right, can I have a show of hands? All in favor of the motion? And that is unanimous. I see Councillor McGrath's hand in the far corner there. So that is unanimous. Thanks for that opportunity, and I'll take the chair, or give the chair back to the mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Journeau. Just to conclude this discussion on face coverings in public areas, outdoor public areas, and with the greatest respect to all of those who take positions on this, and particularly who think it's easy, I have found that it is extremely challenging to work out the nuances, and in particular the conversation that we had with respect to eating and drinking on sidewalks. Well, I appreciate and support Councillor Butler's suggestion that we won't be looking for necessarily really enthusiastic enforcement if somebody is enjoying an ice cream cone. The reality is that when I looked at experience elsewhere, I found that in Disneyland, of all places, their experience quickly became, because they allowed initially eating and drinking, people would get a big gulp or whatever it is, and they would walk around all day without a mask on the basis that they were eating or drinking. And we open that opportunity. So we can say, no, that's not the rule, and exercise a degree of flexibility. But we also have to recognize that there are those who will use every opportunity we allow to subvert the public safety prerogative. And that was one of the challenges, among many others, that had to be addressed here. So I appreciate that discussion. They have now, Disneyland has gone to change their rules, and you can certainly buy a drink, but you sit down where you bought it, and that's where you consume it. You don't walk around with it. You walk around with a mask on. But it seems to me that was essential learning for other jurisdictions. All right, thank you for all of that. Again, thank you, Mr. Don. I hope the motion now is clarified, and you know what you're dealing with. You have a map. We can color it up and be prepared to post it at another day. That takes us to agenda item 8, and 8.1 is the well, 8.1 is the bylaw summary. 8.2 is the draft temporary compulsory face covering bylaw. Did you wish to speak any further on that, Ms. Nadon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can, but also I would be happy to let you do it. So essentially this, I believe, was we looked at other bylaws in Alberta, which we now have Edmonton, Calgary, and Banff that also passed similar bylaws. And Mayor Iwin did the heavy lifting on this one. And I confirmed the definitions and the format and making sure that it met our own guidelines essentially. And like I mentioned earlier, this would apply to indoor public places, which would include those that are not under the care and control of the municipality of Jasper. And I'm happy to let Mayor Iwin speak to it some more. Thank you.
The bylaw speaks for itself. It is an intent to require the wearing of face coverings in indoor public places. It's a difficult issue in many respects. Again, lots of challenges, but and I've spoken before about the value in voluntary compliance. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of those businesses in our community who have already required the wearing of face coverings in their establishment. The value of allies and willing volunteers in this effort is just tremendous. And if this bylaw passes, then no one henceforth will be able to take as much credit as those who have already acted can and deserve to take. Nevertheless, it's something that has to be done. There are just a couple of things in the bylaw that I think are worth noting, and one is the enforcement provision. This bylaw will be enforced only by officers. So that could be bylaw, it could be RCMP, it could be wardens. But we have no expectation and no desire for individuals in our community or businesses to enforce the bylaw on our behalf. It's important that we recognize that this is a tool of local government and we should be the ones responsible. The only expectation of businesses is to post the sign, and we will do any enforcement that is required beyond that. Again, there are lots of nuances that come with this, but following other examples, I think we're required to move in this direction, and we should move in this direction. As the three-part test that Councillor Demota indicated earlier, it's the right thing to do, and now is the time to do it. So the bylaw is there. The one thing where it might be open to amendment is that while I was drafting this, I had consciously considered how I view compliance with this particular requirement for face coverings in indoor public places. And it seems to me that it is as dangerous to the public as running a stop sign or driving through a crosswalk. And so I proposed penalties that would be more in line with those offenses. And they are quite a bit heavier than other jurisdictions use. And I think it's important to underscore the importance of the conduct that we are attempting to regulate. This is a serious matter. However, I recognize in hindsight that the penalties under the Conduct in Public Places bylaw are less than the penalties proposed in this bylaw. So if there is an interest in making things more consistent, I am certainly open to that. The point has been made that wearing a mask is a requirement, or could be a requirement in this community. And failing to do so puts the public at risk. It puts our residents at risk. It puts our local economy at risk. And of course, it puts our visitors at risk. So it's important to take every opportunity, I think, to underscore that. Those are my only comments with respect to the bylaw. Councillor Demota?
Again, commend you for working on this and to you developing a really good and sound bylaw. And I think what I would like to do, particularly for the first reading, is just, I would like to move that we accept this and then move it to second reading so that we can debate any type of structure in there. And then when it comes, if it comes back for third reading, hopefully it does, then I would propose that, again, do the same thing that we did for the first reading. It's the mayor's bylaw, and I think a really good one. Well, okay, it's council's bylaw. I apologize, I see that, but the fact that you helped craft this and put the time into it, go through the same process as before, because I don't want to take away, I don't want to be politically grandstanding, but I just put forward the motion so that you can have the chair to control the debate and stuff like that. So that's what I'd like to do right now. I believe that we accept this as is for the first reading, then work through the intricacies for the second reading.
I have then from Councillor Demota a motion that council read for the first time bylaw number 228 being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to make compulsory the wearing of face coverings in indoor public places in the town of Jasper. Any debate on first reading? Councillor Butler?
I suppose I would like to take this opportunity to weigh in because partly because I don't want to see this bylaw passed without some discussion, particularly about foregoing actions that council has taken, because there is a sense from some in the community, I believe, that council has been has delayed, has been slowly addressing this question, and I think that's fair, but unfortunate in this sense. I think that what council could be accused of, because we are dealing with this at the midpoint of summer rather than earlier in the summer, I think what council could be accused of is optimism. I'm disappointed in a sense that it is necessary to pass this bylaw along with the motion we just passed. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think that has now become clear. But I had hoped, and we all did, that strong public messaging around mask wearing would be adequate to for people to do what I honestly think most of us recognize now constitutes just plain good, respectful behavior in public. But it hasn't turned out to be the case. And I'm a little sad about that. But that certainly needs to be in a position of passing this bylaw. And it's important for the public also to understand that this bylaw on its own isn't really a complete piece of legislation because it works hand in hand in parcel with the conducting public places bylaw, which we just addressed. So I'm certainly in favor of this. The details are adequate to address the concerns we have. I hope that the proprietors of privately operated indoor public spaces find that this is helpful to them, not hindrance to them. And on balance with those I've talked to, I think most do feel that they will find themselves in a position, those operators, that their ability to encourage patrons to wear masks will be enhanced by law, and that we're not asking asking them to enforce it, and under specific provision that states categorically that enforcement is in the hands of officers, not of proprietors. And proprietors throughout Jasper have truly been allies. We, in fact, have, I think, considerably more of a concern on public sidewalks than we have in spaces, indoor spaces. I think, well, largely because those proprietors have worked hand in hand with us to communicate effective messaging. So, I want to thank everyone for their work on this. Just say my support of providing it with just reading it.
Councillor Demotte?
Where would you like to handle the debate on changing the fine structure? On this first reading, or does it matter?
No. Give it first reading, and then we have something that we can debate. So if there is nothing else with respect to the question on first reading, I will call the question. So this is a question to give first reading to bylaw number 228. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And now to your question, Councillor Demotte, if somebody would like to make a motion to give it second reading, then we can debate amendments. Councillor Keller-Gampy?
I'll make the motion to give bylaw 228 second reading.
That is the motion. Open for debate. Councillor Demotte?
Okay, so to be in line with our conduct in public spaces bylaw, in section A, under penalties, it's 3.6. It's kind of where I have this thought where it should match to annoy, disturb, injure, endanger, or detract from the comfort, response, health, peace, or safety of persons within the limits of the town. So, and that first offense is $150, and then it goes the second, and it's 3, and then 5. Even though personally, it also falls under, for me, under 3.2, yell, shout, scream, or call out profanities or obscenities. To me, that's the same thing, but the first offense is also $150 there. So I would think that I understand how harsh the 250 is. I think if you're going to have it in one place or out on the sidewalk, it should match whether it's inside or outside. That's just my point of view, and I'm willing to be flexible on that. I just thought for continuity that and bounce is 150 as well.
Are you proposing an amendment to Schedule A to change those numbers to $150?
Yes, I am, and I think maybe that we should have a second and third offense in there as well. I detract that. Never mind. If someone else wants to say it, I'm okay with just changing it to 150.
All right, Councillor Butler, and then Councillor Juneau, and I've lost Councillor McGrath. Can you get her back?
We did lose Councillor McGrath about a minute or two ago. I assume it might be the internet connection or anything like that, so I'm keeping an eye out for her, but she's currently not in the meeting.
All right, I will allow the debate to continue, but I won't call a question until she's had an opportunity to re-engage in the meeting and get her comments. So, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, and I have a question. Procedurally, does amending schedule of penalties in a bylaw require certification from Parks Canada? And does it require rereading a bylaw, or can schedule of penalties be amended through motion of council? And I'll tell you the reason I'm asking. I noticed the same discrepancy, if it is one, between our conduct in public places bylaw and this proposed bylaw. But I was preparing to take the opposite view, that what we should do is raise the minimum penalty of the conduct in public places bylaw to $250, because I find myself agreeing with Mayor Harley's suggestion that the fact is that failing to wear a mask in public places in these situations should be seen as seriously as some other offenses like blowing songs. So I was going to go the other way, but I don't know if we can do that without difficulty. But I would simply raise the minimum penalty in our conduct in public places bylaw to this.
Mr. Tom.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler, a bylaw can only be amended by bylaw. So a motion would not effectively create the change that we would be hoping for. So even to change the fee schedule or the penalties in the Code of Conduct in Public Places bylaw, thank you, we would need to pass a bylaw in order to amend a bylaw. So it's a bit of a cumbersome process, and schedules are part of bylaws, so therefore are subject to certification from Parks Canada as well, I would suggest.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Juneau.
Thank you. Just a bit of a clarification on the usefulness of the adaptability, the workings of the bylaw. So my question comes from a restaurant owner whose first language is not English. They indicated to me, look, don't pass this bylaw. We took it upon ourselves early on in the summer to require people to wear masks, because we thought we did. It caused us nothing but problems because people were not abiding. I realize that's probably more like a month ago. The culture has changed, the thinkings have changed, and so on and so forth. But the question is under this bylaws, people come into a business, you just let them come in or you refuse them because, like Councilor Butler mentioned, we don't want to make it more difficult for businesses because for them, business is very important right now. So I just want to see how the practicality of this bylaw will work for business. In other words, what do we tell business when we go outside tonight and they come and ask us, how's it going to affect me? I'd like some discussion there, some clarification for my own sake as to how that is going to be implemented.
On that particular question, the intent of the bylaw is to require every operator who welcomes the public into their premises to post at every entrance to those premises a prominent sign that clearly states all persons entering and remaining within these premises must wear a face covering which covers the nose, mouth, and chin as required pursuant to Municipality of Jasper Bylaw number 228. So all that is required of any business operator is to post the sign. They're not expected to do any enforcement. They're not expected to have confrontations. They are required to put up a sign. This is what our council has said you must do.
Thank you for that, because that was how I was going to approach it. I just want to be clear that we're going to be in unison on that.
Councillor Keller-Hampy.
I have two questions on that. So as us as a municipality, will we provide these businesses the signs to put up in their establishments? Or we're expecting each operator, if we run this in today, that by tomorrow morning to have these signs up? My second question is to administration through Mayor Ireland. Do we have masks that we can provide to these businesses or to Bylaw? Because we may have some people come to town that don't know we have a new bylaw. They may not have a bylaw where they're living. And so how do we want to approach this?
Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Kelleher MP. We did check in on our stock of masks that we received from the Masks for Albertans programs. And we have, well, that's information from last week, but I believe we had something around 4,000, which in the grand scheme of things is not very many. And Mr. Van Tegem had indicated that when he reached out to the province to ask for more masks, he was told that there was uncertainty with regards to whether that program was going to continue or not. So our ability to access masks that could be distributed to businesses for use in their own premises or to visitors in general is somewhat limited. And
whether we could provide the sign. We also talked about phased in approach to the sign.
Yeah. Excuse me, I'm losing my train of thoughts today. Signage was one of your concerns. The statement is quite simple in the bylaw, so there could be a possibility that proprietors could put up their own signage. If council wanted to direct administration to provide that signage, that's also something we could do with clear council direction. And one of the considerations we wanted to discuss in camera, but that part specifically doesn't need to be in camera, but sort of a phased in approach to the bylaw. So the day the bylaw is effective, which I believe the wording currently suggests that as soon as it's passed, it's effective. But then for when enforcement would begin, we also recognize that we will need to communicate a lot, namely send our mayor for media interviews to regional media and to ensure people outside of our community are aware that it is now compulsory to have face coverings in Jasper. So we will exercise a grace period before we send officers out there enforcing, including for what businesses will be expected to do in regards to this bylaw.
Sorry, I just had been hearing on the radio on one of the talk shows this morning how Edmonton and Calgary, that some groups are coming out saying, well, where can we get masks? So that's why I thought I'd raise it. I don't even know if there's anywhere in town to buy them.
Councillor Wilson.
I think any of our visitors know that they should have a mask with them. If they don't, I think that's on them. They're coming from communities across Alberta. Many communities are requiring masks. It is not the responsibility of the municipality to supply masks. They shall have a mask. They shall have pants when they come into our store. They shall have a mask when they come into the store. We're not supplying pants when they come into the store. They are they're not even told now, because everybody wears pants when they go into a store. I think a mask is the new pants, or the new shirt at least.
Sorry, Councillor Janelle.
Just briefly, the province did announce today that discontinuing the distribution of masks that they had undertaken effective today, but discontinued that.
Councillor Demoto.
I understand where Councillor Keller MP is coming from. I apologize. You know, if a business or two asks until they can get some more masks, if they want to supply some and they don't have any, maybe ask if we have some. It's the same as when the Rotary Club offered sanitizing stations. There were only so many, and some people are on a list for the next batch to come in if it comes in. So, I mean, it's nice to have free stuff. At the same time, we're talking about the health and safety of our community. I don't like to shove things down people's throats. What I'd like to suggest is what Councillor or what Ms. Nadon had mentioned is, you know, maybe enact enforcement as like give people till Friday to come up with signage and to get some signage out, and then if people need some masks, because the people that have traveled here that don't know about the masking rule, then maybe ask and we could provide until we run out. I'm not sure if that's the right way to do it. Just an idea. So I totally understand where you're coming from. It makes sense. There are some people that, you know, cross their arms and like, I'm not buying masks, I'm not wearing them, and you know, and I know, I get it. But at the same time, it's if we're going to deter, you know, business from a particular business because they're not ready for it yet, then I don't want to be in that position as well. But I don't think that we should be on the hook for providing masks for every business that needs.
Just to be clear, the intent of the bylaw as written is that no business is required to provide masks, and there's no obligation on the municipality to provide masks. I did have discussion with one restaurateur in town who said that the cost of masks for their business would be $300 to $500 a day. We cannot take on that obligation as a municipality for every business in town. Not that every business would have that same demand, but people are going to have to sort out some questions. And again, it underscores that as we started this discussion, we are all in this together. Everybody has a role and everybody has some responsibility. We can play our role, but we can't be responsible for everybody's obligation. So that's simply the way it's written, not that it cannot be amended. Did I miss you, Councillor Butler? Did I see your hand up? I do see Councillor McGrath's hand up, so I will go there first and then to you. Okay. Thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question for council is, when, say, I arrive in Jasper and I'm visiting and I didn't prepare with my mask, what sort of grace would be given for me to be able to walk up to one of the locations in Jasper that sell masks so I can purchase one as soon as I arrive, and then I'm prepared for my stay? I know where I currently am on vacation, there is masks available outside of the grocery store for purchase for $1. So by the time you walk in the establishment, you already purchased your mask. So I just wonder from a visitor perspective, how to make that transition to them maybe arriving without a mask and learning that they need one, and how do they get one?
Thank you for that, Councilor McGrath. I don't have a clear answer for you, but it's something certainly to consider. I know that masks are available at a number of establishments. We could communicate that. Some through the province, commercial establishments, and some through our own facilities, I believe. I don't have a list currently at my disposal, but it's something that we could certainly publicize. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. A couple of points in response to points that have already been raised. First is, in a way, I understand the concerns around availability of masks. It is a concern. However, we already made it an earlier concern because we've already made it an offense for people to even walk down our sidewalks downtown without a mask. So the people that don't have a mask with them are already in trouble before they get to the door of a shop or a restaurant. And I mean, I'm being a little sarcastic in a way there, but I think it's important to recognize that the motion we passed with respect to enforcement of the conduct of public places bylaw, along with this bylaw, if we do now adopt it, this suite of legislation is going to create all sorts of problems. It absolutely is. We are going to have angry people. We are going to have proprietors of public spaces who are going to have some trouble. We are going to have enforcement officers who are going to get pushback from people. We are going to have residents and visitors potentially confronting non-mask wearing public on our public streets and pointing up to them that you are in breach of the bylaw. So we're going to have trouble. One of the ways in which we're going to have trouble is people are going to say, you made me wear a mask and you don't have one for you. Yeah, that's true. And none of those concerns are a reason to, in my mind, to not pass the bylaw. It's really important that we raise these issues, partly because I think it's really important for us as a community to understand these are some of the reasons that we hope that we wouldn't actually have to go to the extent of passing the bylaw, because as soon as you, and I raised this point last week, as soon as we find ourselves trying to legislate, polite and proper social behavior, or what we often call social norms, we absolutely are going to run into trouble. It is something we would rather not do. And availability of masks, questions around enforcement, questions around what kind of a position do we put providers of private public spaces in. All of these are legitimate concerns, and I'm kind of worried about all of them. But on balance, and these decisions are always made among us on balance, it's still the right forward. Thank you.
If I could return, Councillor DeMora, I see you have your hand up, but you also have a motion on the floor from which we have been a bit distracted. So the motion was with respect to amending the penalty section. And we had limited debate on that and then went on to other things, but I'd like to bring us back to that particular motion to amend Schedule A of the bylaw. Is there anything further any councillor wants to say with respect to that motion by Councillor DeMora to amend the specified penalty in Schedule A to $150 from $250? Councillor Wilson.
I support the 250 fee. I don't think we need to change that. I think we should be serious about this, and it is a public safety concern, and should fine accordingly.
Councillor DeMora.
So 250 for inside, 150 for outside? Is this 150 outside right now? Outside. So that's, I was just trying to make it, give it continuity. I would have been on side with Councillor Butler if we were able to change that. If we, I would, 250 across the board would have been good, but it would take us another bylaw, and I just don't think we have the time. And to me, I don't want it to be perceived as a cash grab either, even though 250 is harsh, and I think it should be a harsh thing. I still think that 150 still sets the message. That's just me, and that's my motion.
Hi, Councillor Butler. Well, I am inclined to think that it is not that difficult to amend the other bylaw, the conduct in public places bylaw. We won't be able to do that for 2 weeks, but I doubt that in the initial 2 weeks, there's going to be very much enforcement anyway. There's going to be an awful lot of education. And in 2 weeks, we could bring back the conduct in public places bylaw with a simple amendment to amend the penalty structure there to match the penalty structure here and achieve consistency, but at a higher level. And again, make a point of the seriousness of the event. So I'm more inclined to do that, and I appreciate that all things take time, but as I said earlier, the superintendent has been very accommodating, and we can, in all likelihood, get through 3 readings today. We could probably, in all likelihood, get through 3 readings of the other bylaw, an amendment to the other bylaw, in 1 meeting as well.
So if I may, then I'll retract that motion, because that is the intent, and it was just about consistency. And what I also wanted to entertain was reviewing this weekly and just having it as part of the agenda to discuss, masking in public, and just to see where we're at every week, so that if there are issues that some of what Councillor Butler was addressing, and they become heightenedly problematic, and we should have those discussions on how we're going to do it. So I think BAP's already made. I'm sorry that I keep referring to BAP, but they made a commitment to review it every week, and I think it's healthy. That's something that we've already done with going forward from our last initiative. So I think it's a healthy way to do it, and just to see where where our pitfalls are and where our wins are. So I'm withdrawing.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I have a question regarding more of a policy level discussion on this bylaw and how the penalties will be enforced. And I did miss some conversation as the second reading began, and I apologize for that. I had a technical glitch. With regards to our ideal enforcement situation, beginning with education and information, and lastly, enforcement, do we have a different ideal with this bylaw? Do we have more direction for that first run-in with bylaw to be a $250 penalty, or do we have a way to track, say, we first educate the visitor that this is bylaw in the municipality of Jasper, and some way to track their name for that potential second run-in where they would be handed a $250 fine?
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. We still have to continue those discussions, and I don't want to presume the will of council, but it seems to me that this bylaw is in fact simply another tool in our ongoing effort to raise awareness and to educate people about the need. And I can't imagine that council, having fully committed to strongly recommending the wearing of face masks initially and trying to get the word out, is very likely to deviate from that. So again, it is still just one tool in the arsenal of a campaign towards education leading to mask use, not the forcing of face coverings, but the use of them. And that seems to me still to be the underlying motivation of council. But of course, I cannot speak to the particulars of council's will, because council hasn't determined its will precisely on that question. I think, though, that that is the intent of the later discussion today. Mr. Furcho?
Your worship, if I might, just for council, we seek to get off track onto the mechanics of the enforcement side a bit through the discussion. If council, in this case, deals with the fine, all bylaw enforcement in the municipality of Jasper has basically the same sort of track or ethos, is that bylaw looks for compliance first. 99% of the time it's education and compliance. That's the similar track our bylaw officers would take in this case as well. And it would be on those rare occasions where enforcement would be necessary only. So rest assured, without council's direction, that bylaw would operate as bylaw does with all bylaws, is strive for compliance. Education is what we're going to provide, give people the tools. Bylaw will be out there looking for compliance. Compliance 99% of the time, and it's only on those rare occasions where enforcement will be required. And we really don't need council to spend a lot of time on that. That's simply how the bylaw works in Jasper.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho. Councillor Demota, I will accede to your request to withdraw your motion. So there is not a motion currently to amend. Councillor Wilson?
I'll make a motion to read for a second time bylaw number 228, stating that make it compulsory wearing of a face covering in indoor public places in the town of Jasper.
Well, thank you for that. But we started with that motion from Councillor Kelleher MP, and then we went to an amendment.
Oh, my apologies. Sorry, I thought he pulled the, okay.
No, he pulled an amendment, but Councillor Kelleher MP has made the motion for
My apologies.
second reading. Councillor Butler?
Thank you. Just briefly, I had wanted to make a point about the penalty. 250 versus 150, and it's just this, that I think that in fact, refusing to wear a mask in an indoor space compared to maybe failing to wear a mask in the outdoor is actually particularly egregious. I think that it is actually appropriate that it's a higher penalty for what really would amount to not failure to, but refusal to, because we know that every single indoor public space has now imposed a sign saying, hey, wear a mask here. So if you're not wearing it indoors, you really are injuring people, and you really are refusing and not maybe just being out. So I'm actually okay with the disparity in those penalties.
Thank you for that, Councillor Butler. I wanted to raise, just for clarity, I'm not necessarily proposing a change, but and it was mentioned, I think, earlier by Ms. Nadon, but I draw your attention to Article 11.1 of the bylaw, which provides that the bylaw will come into force and effect on the final day of passing. And so that could be as early as today, but if we wish to choose another day, now would be the time to do that. My thought is that from a public perspective, this day has been postponed too long already, so I think that it's just go with it and do it, and we will deal with the enforcement as we go and as required. But I just draw that to your attention that is the provision. Councillor Janot?
Just as an aside, I'm still disappointed that the municipalities have to do this. I think that this responsibility belongs to public health, and public health is a matter for the provincial government. They have clearly stated that, you know, they try and give the message out. So physical distancing, in addition to mask, cohorting, frequent hand washing, sanitizing, is what's needed to stop the spread of this. And I think they're the ones that should be passing that message. They should be providing masks, and they should be providing posters for all the businesses across the province to ensure that there's a clear, concise message, instead of dilly-daddling here by municipalities. Well, here's one where you have and you don't. We're not serious about addressing this matter. I think it's their responsibility, and I think they should be supplying masks and posters to make it easier for businesses to deal with this.
Yeah, it's just more red tape.
All right. If there is nothing further, I have a motion from Councillor Kelleher-Anthony that council read for the second time bylaw number 228, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to make compulsory the wearing of face coverings in indoor public places in the town of Jasper. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So we have second reading. In order to proceed to third reading, we need two things. We need certification from Parks Canada. So I am going to, in a moment, call a recess so I can notify the superintendent that we have achieved second reading and he has agreed to be on standby to certify. We can then come back and subject to unanimous consent of council, we can agree to first a motion to proceed with third reading today and then third reading. So I will call a brief recess, perhaps 10 minutes, so we can convene at 3:05, and that will give enough time to hopefully put things in order for certification of our bylaw, it having achieved second reading. So I will call a recess temporarily.
Earlier, but what are the sizes of the stalls? Like, are they all uniform length? No,
Yeah, and unless the director of operations wants to chime in, I believe they're all like regular vehicle-sized parking stalls. So what do you have in the plan?
and before lines go in, I would just maybe suggest, and I guess, you know, I think we're trying to attract commercial operators and, you know, lengthwise, like buses, buses, trailers, etc. They may end up being longer than the regular stall.
Maybe I'll just ask John if he's available to speak to that, because there was a few different versions before with the line painting, and I don't know if that was changed by the time we got the final.
Your Worship, to respond to Councillor Wilson's questions, there's 13 oversized of the, or 13 of the oversized parking spots planned, and a total of 76 stalls in total.
Is there an opportunity to go more larger stalls, and if so, maybe could the fee represent that? If you're going to get if you needed a larger stall for a bus or a large trailer, I'm sure the operator would be willing to pay more than just the regular stall. And if we have an influx of people requiring longer stalls, can we accommodate that in the future, or should we be putting the list out now before we paint the lines?
I believe with the layout of the lot, it's set in stone. I don't believe that there's much variance we can put in at this part at this stage of the game. Right now, it's just I guess it would be the stalls on the northwest section of the lot that are oversized, and that's right up against the property line. That was as many stalls as we could fit in that section of land, and that included 15 on-street parking stalls. They won't technically be on the street. It'll be shifted off off of the road edge, and then there wouldn't be, there's parallel parking along the side of the road, but it is off the road edge there.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, my only suggestion would be that if there are premium spots, the fee would represent that.
Any other questions for Mr. Virtual? Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I'm certainly in favor of the monthly fee as recommended. I'm in favor, as I think we've all stated in the past, of the principle here, but I think it's really important that if we do move forward with applying fees for parking in that lot, that we have to understand that we have to be willing to take the necessary next steps. We can't just charge parking fees for vehicles to park in that space and then not be willing to proceed with what I took the goal to be here, which is to clean up the anarchy that is parking in Bobcats, get the large commercial vehicles off the street, encourage proprietors to business people to keep that area clean, and to avoid unfettered and unregulated use of publicly provided parking by businesses without charge. So if we charge for parking in that lot and then do not proceed down the road of having conversations around enforcement and around the potential of maybe having to implement charges in some other areas of town, we will not have solved the problem, we will have created a problem. And I would find it unacceptable if and what could happen is that we could effectively penalize those who are by nature that want to have their large commercial vehicles on public streets and are inclined to park them where we ask them and pay the fee. And if they're the only ones that do that, then we're penalizing those who are inclined to comply and rewarding those who don't want to comply and will find some other place to park their oversized vehicles and commercial vehicles where they can sort of get away with it. So I'm absolutely in favor of this, but I think only if we collectively understand that we're going to have the will to take next steps, and we won't accomplish everything here today or in the next weeks, but we have to understand that we can't say, okay, $150 a month for these spots and then walk away from it and everything's just going to work out, because it won't. There will be people who say, well, why do I pay when I can park my big something over by the Home Hardware and nobody bothers me about it. So on that basis, I'm in favor. But I hope we all feel that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Mr. Furcho, how is the fee to be administered mechanically? To what will this fee attach?
Your Worship, I'm not quite clear on your question, like legislatively or operationally?
Well, principally legislatively. So we just had a discussion about schedules to bylaws with penalties, which require a bylaw to change. And my concern is this, that in principle, I support this, but it is, again, one of those issues where it is a challenge to separate governance from administration. And I think I would be more comfortable passing a motion directing administration to set fees for use of parking stalls in the new S block parking lot, and to adjust those fees from time to time at the discretion of the CAO. I find it difficult to understand this as a governance decision of council. Establishing a fee is, we can say that, yes, that's going to be paid parking. But to worry about the precise fee, knowing that things will change over time, really this is a much more administrative decision than how to the fee. And so legislatively, where does this fee attach? How do you impose the fee on anybody that wants to use a stall? And how tied is the fee once it's set to a council decision, and must you come back to council every time there should be a change? I would rather make a broad policy statement at the council level saying, yes, this is paid parking. Go figure it out. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Your Worship. If it's the will of council to proceed that way, the legislative framework is already there for that in terms of the rates and fees bylaw, which says exactly what you've just explained, as in the CAO is authorized to determine fees as long as they are posted for the public to see, is the clause in there. So essentially, we usually accomplish that through our website. And there's the interplay between a fee that's set by council versus a fee that's set by the CAO. The council fee would take precedence over any previous fee that the CAO has determined. And then the third arm to this is any fee that's set in a bylaw already. So relevant to this report is the storage lots bylaw, for example. So there's a fee that's set by bylaw in that event. Therefore, no council motion or CAO directive could change that, which I see Councillor Butler finding this process interesting, perhaps. It is one of the areas where we need to streamline how we do things. And in most communities, the rates and fees bylaw has a list of annual fees that are anything from getting copies of a document from the administration office to other sort of clerical, if you will, fees that are established in each department. And then annually, that list gets updated, and it's therefore approved by council. Bylaw is the typical way to function. What we have is a bunch of different fees in different bylaws. And then this rates and fees bylaws, which is a bit of an anomaly, in my opinion, where it says the CAO can set fees, but so can council. And the council fees will supersede what the CAO may decide. So perhaps a bit more information than you were looking for, but in any event, whether you wish to redirect this to the CAO to set the fees, or modify the motion to say that council direct administration to set fees, or that council sets the fee at a specific amount, are all viable options at this point.
Not at all more than I was looking for. I appreciate all of that. Thank you. Councillor Demota.
Well, I appreciate that line of questioning and the thought behind that, because I mean it's no different for me than setting fees for bulk water or fitness passes or anything like that. I think it totally makes sense. So I appreciate that.
Well, there we have it. I mean, I don't really mind if we set a fee, but this is not, I think, long-term productive use of council's time to sit and look at fee structures. I mean, we don't set fees for dog and cat licenses and lots of other things. Here we enter the mix, and once we do, I think we have some obligation to stay in it. So I'm leaning the other way, but I want to do what best facilitates the operation as well. Mr. Pritchett?
Your Worship, I guess the intent from administration on this was, like when we bring forward a new policy with a procedure, for something that's new to the municipality, we do typically bring both of those documents forward, although the procedure is fully within administration's realm, so that council can see how the two interplay and what we intend to roll out from council's direction at an operational level. And this is the same. So the idea being that typically we don't charge for parking in Jasper. This would be a new thing. We have the RV paid storage, which is lower. We don't have paid parking in town yet, but this is kind of an in-between. And because it was new, we thought a debate with council on the actual sort of ballpark area of the fee. And I agree, if council left it to set with administration as we do, like we don't have a discussion with administration or with council on the adjustments we make to recreational fees, for example, each year. I do that. That doesn't come to this table. But this is new, so that was the purpose behind this conversation, just so council's aware. The next meeting, the meeting after, and the meeting after that, we're intending to have the different consulting firms come to show council how parking fees can be potentially implemented within the community, the different types of technology out there, and some of the different systems. So that sort of political realm of parking fees stays at play. But for the purposes of today, if council simply directed administration to set a parking fee in S block, we've had a conversation, we get an idea of what council is thinking in terms of dollar amounts. That would be enough for administration, certainly.
Councilor Butler? Councilor Butler?
Thanks, and this is a really good conversation, and I think honestly what Ms. Madame observed on my face there was there appeared to be a look of consternation. I think I was just scratching a blood fight. But and thinking about what Councilor Wilson said, is a number the right way to approach this when there are some larger spaces, some smaller spaces, and different kinds of vehicles. And I'm thinking maybe we should, in essence, sort of withdraw this as a request for decision, or just don't accept it as a request for decision, and really, one way or another, indicate our satisfaction with, as Mr. Pritchett suggested, sort of a ballpark idea that, in principle, I find the guidelines that have been indicated here that might come out at something like $150 a space, but that might be, I don't know, it could even be more for a bigger space and less for another space. And I find that acceptable, but I would further suggest that maybe we toss it back to administration to consider whether we can administer this within the bylaw that Ms. Madonna referred to, and achieve maximum flexibility. For example, there might be space in here, so I'm aware that we don't have enough space in our RV storage lots right now. And so I think that there's been some discretion shown by bylaw with respect to some RVs being stored in certain areas of town. Maybe now we're going to have room that some of those can be pushed over where we would prefer them to be off public streets and over into this podcast site. But it's not fair to charge them $150 a month when I think the charge in the RV storage site is $360 a year or something. I mean, that wouldn't be fair. And we quickly get down into the fine details as council or helping along this week. Maybe we should suggest that this be the specifics of the fees, the way they're applied, large vehicles, small vehicles, commercial vehicles, private vehicles, be handled by administration with, and they come to council when guidelines are needed. So,
Councilor Keller-Renty?
I just want to clarify something there. Councillor Butler, restricting the motorhomes would be parked here. I thought we had a discussion that this would truly be more geared towards the commercial aspect of our community. It would be more just I'd like to clean up a block where there's parking of big equipment, that there's nowhere to go, that contractors that are operating off the street, that this was the intent behind this parking lot, not necessarily to turn it into a storage unit for motorhomes or cars that somebody needs to store for the winter. It was my understanding when we went down this road for this parking lot that it was commercial parking lot. So if a bus company came into town and they needed somewhere to, they were here for a week, that they wouldn't be on the street, that they could rent space here for that week. So I was under the understanding that this parking is totally commercial.
Mr. Wilson's motion, I just don't have it handy.
There was wording in Councillor Wilson's motion way back. I just don't have it in this report. I don't know if we have access to that. That specified exactly that.
Thank you, and I agree, though the motion that we're dealing with actually says for use by community members. The motion doesn't say for commercial use. I believe our intent was primarily to go in that direction. But I mentioned that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know that it's a fairly large parking lot, and I don't know if there is actually enough need from commercial vehicles. Maybe there is, but I do think that should be the first use. But the thing that gave me pause a little bit as well is I'm a little surprised to hear that there are so few oversized spots in that lot and more smaller spots. And again, allowing administration the flexibility to manage it to achieve the outcomes we're hoping for, which I think is fewer commercial vehicles and fewer oversized vehicles on public streets, generally Block SCS, but even the rest of the community might be able to go. I don't argue with the point you raised that really our intent is primarily for commercial and industrial vehicles. If I might further, maybe this is telling us that you should come back to the committee of the whole for a little more conversation.
Councillor DeMotte?
I was trying to pull up the diagram of what we were given to last and where we were moving forward, what we knew we were moving forward with. And I thought all of that, the dimensions and the amount of lots were described in there. Because I remember the day after discussing it, I was in the hardware store and somebody asked me about it and I was able to pull it up on my phone. But for some reason I can't find it right now. I was just going to redistribute that. However, I'm very impressed with the intelligence and the intelligence behind the fee structure. Intelligence as in intel gathering and intelligence and the intelligent work that went behind it. I think it gives me comfort and more confidence going forward with future decisions and having them take care of these things. And I'm okay with it, and I'm okay with not having a motion for it today and just having it go with what they've set up.
How soon, Mr. Furcho, would you anticipate you are to, let's start that again. How soon will you be in a position to charge for spaces?
Your Worship, maybe I'll defer that question of the completion of the parking lot to our Director of Operations, and then also bylaw and licensing in terms of our ability to how we wanted to administer that. And we could, maybe both of those gentlemen can have a chance to speak to those two questions. Administratively, it's a schedule that I set with rates and charges that we could attach that to. That could be done anytime. It's just the operational side of completing the parking lot and then creating a system for people to put in for a space and be charged for that space. So kind of 3 steps there. So I don't know if John and Neil, if you guys are ready.
Your Worship, We should be completed the parking lot within about 10 days. There's a bit of topsoil work to do along the berms bordering the CN land. And I'm not sure, I believe the line painting is supposed to be completed this week. We were going to have all the stalls individually numbered for tracking and for rental purposes, so that's part of the plan. The street lights have been installed, so it's pretty much just ready to go. And once we get the paint markings down, so I would say within 2 weeks we should be ready to roll.
Thank you for that, Mr. Greathead. And so there's some indication here that maybe this come back to Committee of the Whole, which is only a week away, although I'm not inclined personally to engage any deeper. I think I have all the information that I need, but I am inclined to say, in principle, charge a fee, $150 a month for kind of a regular size parking stall. Seems like a good starting point, but I want to leave it open. I think Councillor Wilson makes a very good point that for oversized parking stalls, maybe the fee should be different and higher. And things are going to change over time. So I would rather step out of the way as council, agree in principle that that's a good starting point, but that's all it is a starting point, and leave it to administration. And as has been discussed, you've done excellent work to get us to this point. I have faith in that sort of a process, and if you simply need a nod to get started, I'd like to give the nod in principle, but not have to worry about details which are bound to change over time in any event, are better in your bailiwick than in ours, in my view.
Your worship, that certainly does work for administration. It's you know, the intent behind charging a fee or not charging a fee is what administration was looking for clear direction on in terms of the actual fee structure and setting the amount and adjustments annually or whatnot. That definitely is ours, but whether or not we charge was certainly the biggest part of this question.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I sit fairly neutral on the subject, and I agree with much of what Councillor Butler expressed in his comments. And being that we do have 89 potential renters, I'm not sure if we would have that many commercial users. So opening it up for the wait list that are currently using the RV storage, I believe is a demand that the residents of Jasper are seeking. They're seeking places to store their RVs and to store their items that we don't want on the residential streets of Jasper. But I myself can say in my personal situation, I would not be able to afford $150 a month to store my camper van. So I think that there should be some consideration if it is being used for commercial use or if it is being used for residential use, as Councillor Butler expressed. I'm happy also to let admin be flexible and decide how this goes. And I also would, you know, I do see cost recovery as really important, but also parking availability is super important. So I would even engage some conversation on whether or not we should be charging for the non-commercial use of space. So I do look forward to more conversations, and I think that it's great that our administration has moved this project forward, and congratulations on getting it done, and it looks great. Thank you.
If it is the will of council, we can certainly defer this to the next Committee of the Whole discussion. Unless somebody wants to make a motion on the recommendation today. I see one nod for deferral. Councillor Butler. I think Councillor McGrath said that. All right. I think there is developing consensus, not necessarily unanimity, but to bring this back, please, for further discussion at the next Committee of the Whole meeting, which will be August 11th. I understand that we can't yet return to agenda item 8.2. So we will go to agenda item 9.2, which is a notice of reallocation of capital funds intended for further discussion at committee of the whole next week if required, and decision the week after that at our regular council meeting. We have the request before us. Are there questions of council for Mr. Grayhead or Mr. Birchall regarding this request for adjustments to the capital budget? Councillor Butler.
Thank you. On the approved 2020 capital and enhancement spreadsheet, I guess, there are items in bold and there are items not in bold. And I'd like to understand the difference.
Your worship, through the Councillor Butler, I'll just see if our Director of Finance is able to speak to the formatting of the document.
Good afternoon. Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler, that is just an administrative for keeping track of which was carry forward items and which were approved in 2020 only.
All right, thank you. So we don't really need to worry.
Any other questions with respect to the request for decision? Which will put back in any event for discussion and decision at a later time, Mr. Pritchard.
Your worship, the one item we would look for some direction on is if council would like to see this return at committee of the whole, or if it's straightforward enough that we could simply move it to decision on the 18th.
Which item was that?
Just whether or not the item itself should come back as committee of the whole, or whether it should simply come back 2 weeks hence on a regular council agenda for decision. Councillor Demota?
Well, I'm just wondering, with the announcement of some potential funding coming to the municipality in regards to a 40% coverage from an initiative, is that yet news or official? And would that be applicable to some of the conversations around the right now?
Could be. Mr. Pritchard?
Your worship, that is, so we do have some good news for council, both on operational and capital funding, but that's going to come next week for information to council and for the public to be aware of what we have received. So really, these are internal adjustments, so they're not really relevant. Like, they're not that connected. But there is certainly, I look forward to next week for some really good news on the funding front from both capital and operating funding.
Thank you.
Councillor Butler?
I'd suggest that we accept this for information and ask that it be brought back for decision on the 18th.
Unless I hear otherwise, I certainly concur with that. So it need not come back next week, but in 2 weeks. So thank you for that. Next agenda item 9.3, reopening the activity center. That was here for decision today. Initially having come before us on July 7th. Further discussion on July 21st and July 28th. Anything further, Mr. Furcho, to add to the report that's before us?
Your Worship, Acting Director of Culture and Rec, Angela's on standby as well. Just there has been some conversation. I was away last week, so I just want to make sure there's an opportunity for anything that needs to be discussed that may have occurred last week, both from council and administration, prior to a decision is had a chance to be said.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau.
I guess my question is, what's going to happen on September 21st? Building will be empty. There'll be nobody using it. And I'm wondering why we'd want to open then. We'd be wanting to delay this until there's activity in the place. That's when our facilities will be open, the arena and the curling rink and all the extra facilities. If we're concerned about taking bookings for the hall, we can take bookings for the hall without the activity center being open. We can open it when there's a need. So if there was a need for a booking of the hall, we would open it then. But I don't see, I don't know what's going to happen on September 21st. That we need to reopen then. We can easily postpone this until it's practical to do so.
Councillor Butler, Councillor DeMotta, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'd like to, I guess, build on Councillor Juneau's point. I think that there's a couple of things I'd like to raise. The first is that I see honestly no rationale for reopening the activity center until the major activities that facility services are available to us, and that is the arena and hockey activity and also the curling rink. So to me, I just don't see a rationale for opening what really amounts to a supporting facility for those two facilities until we hear from administration at least what the expected opening dates of those facilities are. So I would suggest that we ask that this request be brought back along with decision about reopening the ice surfaces. So that's my one point and my one suggestion. My second is with respect to taking bookings for the multi-purpose hall. I think that in these times of COVID and the concerns around public gatherings and equally importantly, concerns around fiscally responsible decision making, I think we are forced to re-examine some of our priorities. And I myself struggle with the idea of us marketing our municipal facilities for things like weddings has come up often when we're economically hugely challenged here in Jasper, and I know that hotels that cater to that kind of business are really going to be struggling to find clientele to fill their meeting spaces and their halls and so on. And I find that I think that we should re-examine our priorities there for the next couple of years to essentially be potentially competing with our local businesses to attract business that really could be going elsewhere. And so particularly when that essentially becomes supplemented by taxpayers. We're looking at a $70,000 request here, and that's not nothing. To essentially encourage business that could be going elsewhere in the community, supporting our local taxpayer businesses. So for all those reasons, I would suggest that this simply brought back in conjunction with a conversation about opening the ice services and not sooner.
Thank you, Councillor DeMotta.
I think that's pretty much all I want.
Councillor Wilson.
I feel that not all, all other activities that we offer in the activity center should be pending hockey and curling. So there are activities that we offer, and going into the fall, those activities will be more beneficial to the community members. Dance, squash, gymnastics. Honestly, I don't know all the things that happen down there, but there are users of our services, and these are members of our community, and I think children should have the opportunity to embark in those activities because they are hockey players. They don't curl. Like their activities shouldn't be pending the anchor of the hockey arena. I'd like to move forward with it, exploring opening it along the same times as the pool and the fitness center.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question is for Mr. Furcho. If council was to delay the opening of the activity center past the recommended September 21st to a date where ice surfaces were ready to be opened, is there any way administratively that the leases or the gymnastics and the dance groups could use the spaces in the activity center without the activity center formally being open?
Your Worship, through to Councillor McGrath, and just our Director of Finance was going to jump in as well with a little bit of information, but certainly no, the facility is our facility, and if there are users in the facility, we are responsible for the opening and the closing of the facility. To just throw the keys at a different group and say, lock it up or open it, or make sure messes are cleaned up. Like, we have to, if people are using the facilities, be responsible and manage those facilities. So there's a number of other considerations on the table as well. We currently are working on finalizing the agreement with our unionized staff on extending the layoff measures till October the 4th. And as Councillor Wilson pointed out, there are other users to the facility too. So it's just, in terms of the scheduling, to have staff, maybe I'd best let our Director of Finance speak to this. She's more prepared for this conversation. I'm not that prepared, but there are economies of scale, for instance, with custodial staff that, part of the facility, like, we're only having parts of different conversations, and sometimes we need to think of things in the whole, because they can't have 5/8 of a person working versus when we just have one person working. There's a lot connected. So if I could, Your Worship, the Director of Finance is ready to speak to this item, and I know the Acting Director of Culture and Rec is available as well. So like I said, I'm just jumping in to this fairly green here.
That's fine. Pleased to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho. Your Worship, through to Council, the report remains the same. However, I did put that there were additional information figures that could be provided should Council require more information on different options, therefore different dates, and that could be provided. That's the only thing that was changed in the report. To give a little bit more insight on the question that arose about the groups using the facility without proper staffing there. I had a conversation with our adjusters today, actually, through email, and they confirmed that yes, it would be more implications, that we would have to set certain things up. It wouldn't be ideal in their eyes. They don't suggest the situation. Especially also because of surrounding the COVID and the extra measures that insurance companies are going to want facilities to ensure for groups coming in. And I just wanted to highlight as well that just after the meeting on Tuesday last week, the acting director of Culture and Recreation indicated that she had 2 phone calls, and one was for the fall fair, I believe it was, and then there was another rental opportunity. But because we don't have a date set to reopen, we can't confirm with any groups on any kind of activity rental that might be able to be scheduled in the future, and that being also planning future events for the ice when they reopen as well. So those are just some tidbits that came to light since our last meeting, and I just wanted to fill council in on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Melchek. Back to Councillor Butler and then Councillor DeMota.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I wanted to respond to the points that Councillor Wilson raised, and quite correctly, and I am absolutely concerned about gymnastics being able to come back in. That's a really important service to the community as well as dance, but I do think that those users could be allowed to use their little piece of the facility. They are really quite independent, and I don't think we have to open on an ongoing basis and staff the facility on an ongoing basis for those two tenants to be able to use their spaces. I understand that our insurance company may prefer that we keep the facility open for those users, but I cannot be convinced that that is really necessary. But my comments earlier reflected a desire that the dance space and the gymnastic space should be made available to those tenants, and I believe that that could be accomplished. I believe those are entirely responsible tenants who can be relied upon to use the facility appropriately. And I know that we already have one tenant who has been granted access to use the facility. That has been done without the facility being open. So I don't know why the same could not be afforded when gymnastics wishes to get back underway, and I don't think we know when they do. And the proprietor of the dance organization already said that they were certainly happy to be able to use their facility without the entire building being open. I believe that we have the will to do so. We can manage that without incurring the $70,000 cost to keep the entire building open, when, as Councillor Gino said, there's bound to be very little left. Thank you.
I think it was Councillor DeMota was next, and then Councillor Wilson.
Just for clarification on what the deficit of $76,000 is contributed to, what are those operating costs? Is that entirely staff or increased utility bills? Entirely or almost all payroll? Could someone answer that?
It's an Angela question.
I believe I asked that last time, and there weren't any exact details, but it was.
The Director of Finance potentially could answer some of that question. There is a split between some costs for staffing and some operational costs. There's also, like we mentioned before, the costs of loss of revenue and whatnot, but I'll just ask our Director of Finance to chime in.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor DeMota. I am just bringing up my spreadsheet at the moment. However, yes, it is mostly staffing costs that you would be looking at. There are some operational costs that do reside in there, but the higher percentage is on the staffing. Just if you give me 2 seconds, I am actually very close to being there. And Your Worship, through to Councillor DeMota, I believe you said 76,000. That was prior. 70,000 is what we're discussing now for opening the date suggested, and because that was a prior request for decision, and that's what it was noted in that It was just noted in there. And the 21st.
Okay, so right now it's available, the office, while you're getting that info, Ms. Malchuk, right now staff are using their offices, right? Like they're there and everything. So, and so,
Go ahead. I think we're giving the courtesy of some time to get a response.
Natasha, you right? Okay, so while we're waiting then, is that a full opening with like full staff? If we're gonna look at maybe letting one of our tenants, like let's say Glenda the Great, operate when we open up the activities, you know, the fitness center and the aquatic center, so that to help facilitate that area, could we just, instead of opening up the whole activity center, just have that her space available for her to work out of, and then, you know, it'll dictate itself whether it's going to be viable or not for her. So we give her the opportunity to go and work in there, provide food services for the people that may be attending the fitness center, the aquatic center, gymnastics, and if we let that go, these are going to cost us $70,000, or could we roll back some of the payroll and people that are needed to a minimal amount if it's just custodial and having someone at the desk or whatever the deal is? Or could someone within the office area work, just having to be able to open things up? Right now, I mean, are we looking at someone at the front desk for security so that we can have Glenda the Great open? Like, I don't want to get too much into details, but you know, we're saying it's going to cost $70,000, but is that like the utopic kind of scenario, or if we're looking at maybe, you know, letting one of our tenants operate in there and having the other users come in to do their thing?
Your worship, through to Councillor Demota, I've had a chance to look up the numbers, and 95% of it is staffing. However, we would be looking at reduced hours. The plan would be to be open from 12 to 8, I believe, is what the Director of Culture and Recreation suggested, Monday to Friday. And after receiving another email back, it was 1 to 8 on the Saturday and Sunday because there was no one to fill the lunch break. So it would be just two staff members, or maybe 3 if there was something that had to be filled for somebody. I'm not sure exactly how the staffing was going, but there is what you'd be looking at. So reduced hours is what gives you the 70,000. And it is on the premise of being there to, therefore the financial reason of, and watching the customers that come through and assisting anybody that might need assistance in the building, whatnot. It's a very large building. So there's oftentimes that front desk person needs to get away and assist those people in the facility.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Councillor Wilson and Councillor Juneau and Councillor Keller.
Just in response to Councillor Butler, he was referring to gymnastics and dance, and those are some pretty big activities that people are doing. But there's Aikido, there's darts, there's Taekwondo, there's squash. We had that massive list of user groups that used our facility, and if we're trying to just, you know, we're going to let dance and gymnastics use the space, but not Taekwondo or Aikido or whomever, right? When we start amalgamating all these schedules, it just makes sense that we should be open for a certain amount of time every day, and we get all those user groups to book in at those available hours, and we offer it up to all of the other activities that take place in the activity center other than hockey and curling. And then Glenda could be actually, Glenda the Great could actually be operating You know, even coming from the fitness center, I'm sure she gets business from there. I just feel like piecemealing it all together, saying, oh, gymnastics can come, but gymnastics goes from like first thing in the morning or 8 o'clock 9 o'clock in the morning, straight through till 9 in the evening. It sure does. I've had children in gymnastics at 10 in the morning, and there's definitely people that participate in gymnastics at 9 o'clock in the evening. So yes, so to try and just, were we giving keys to all these users as well? I just don't get it. Like, if we're going to offer the building up, we open it up and offer it to all users that have used it in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau, and then Councillor Keller.
The reason the building is closed because of a pandemic. It's still with us. While the province is saying that we can reopen, I don't think there's any hurry to reopen. I think that we can allow gymnastics and dance to operate because they'll be doing their own little sanitizing, cleaning, because they'll be a club, kind of. Whereas the other ones are open, and we have to hire a janitor, and there's extra cleaning, and there's more responsibility on us, potentially, of that spread. Large gatherings are still not recommended. So in spite of the fact that they're raising the numbers, they're still saying to be careful. Also very, very concerned about shared tools, utilities, so buffets and so on and so forth. You know, totally back down to. So if we open, we're flirting with danger with COVID. I think there's no hurry to do that. But I think that we can accommodate those two groups, the dance and because they're a private club and they'll have to do their own sanitizing and look after the concerns of the public health by themselves. I don't think it's fair to spend $76,000 for 102 days. That's, you know, close to $750 a day for something that may not be that high usage.
Councillor Keller-Grantham.
So right now, the ICE is supposed to be back in October, supposed to be back operating. I spoke to a couple of members of the board of the gymnastics, and they indicated to me that they did not want to come back in until into October due to the fact that they'd like school to be back to see how the kids are doing at school and COVID is going to come into our community. And the reason behind that is they said that they would hate to open up for gymnastics, have all the kids in there, somebody gets sick, and then they have to shut it down and clean it out. They said it's a lot of work for volunteers. So they have indicated, I do not know where darts are. I just know I used to play darts, and there's 60 to 80 people up there. And if everybody has to be distancing, like there's 8 to a table, it's only supposed to be 6. I'm not sure how they're going to operate because they have to have a certain amount in order for their tournaments and that. And I'm not sure if administration have talked to the dart club, and that I know that their membership is 60 to 80, and I had been up in that facility when there was 60 to 80 people in there, and it's wall to wall. And so I'm not sure how that is going to operate. I think if the arena has indicated to us on time and hockey is going to start at the end of October, why don't we, staff needs to be back 2 weeks before, why don't we just say 15th of October, we open the activity center, it's open to go forward, and that way everything starts at the same time.
Mr. Furcho, sorry, did you?
Sorry, just trying to speak to staff and keep the discussion going. Just for council's information, though, I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is when you mentioned numbers and whatnot and gatherings and operations of the different clubs, there's the provincial regs that supersede the municipal regs, so they'd have to abide by those. We wouldn't set those. That's supersedes us, and they would be expected to follow that. And the number that's in front of council with that opening date is the reduced hours to open the facility, including some operational changes that we wanted to make going forward, to operate the facility at the end of the year at a reduced rate. And what we didn't anticipate was a lot of the conversation with council around changing how the facility operates. that would be a different conversation. Like if we're going to start having ways of giving out keys to different groups and how we manage that if somebody leaves a door open or doesn't lock it and somebody else wanders in and there's groups of people in and out, whose responsibility is that? Like there's so much involved if we're going to change procedure at an administrative level prior to coming back to say we can or can't do this or that for this group or that group. I think that would be a different conversation. So what you have in front of you is a number that includes some operational changes to open the reduced capacity, reduced hours of a facility starting on the same date that the rest of the facility is open, just for uniformity, and allows the concession to operate and those groups, should they want to proceed to the year end. So there is, like I mentioned, other things attached to this. So if council would like to see a retooling or different look at this, we'd have to take it away, come back. I think that would be fair.
Mr. Furcho, I'm still a bit confused about some of the terminology. So the report talks about programs that could resume if the activity center reopens. But is it possible to have activities resume without the activity center reopening? What is the difference in terminology between resumption and reopening? And I think specifically of the daycare, which has resumed. I would have thought that it was part of the activity center, which is closed. But notwithstanding that the activity center is closed, daycare has resumed. I think now there's some special circumstances because of work in the parking lot, but are the seniors restricted now, absent the parking lot issue, from access to their room? Can their activities resume regardless of the fact that we're closed?
So that therein is one good conversation. So we've at this point maintained that the facility is closed, the activity center is closed. So the seniors facility remains closed. And it's part of that whole greater conversation around when the facility is open or closed is one, but if we start piecemealing it, then who gets a key, who doesn't, what's open, what's not, what services are provided or what are not, and who's available to deal with situations or not. Like it's at the end of the day, the municipality is responsible for the municipality's facility, and we've maintained that. If council would like to vary from that, we need to talk about how that looks administratively going forward. So that's how we have been structured to date, and that's the way this report is set up.
Also, with respect to the programming, the report refers to programs that could resume and refers to the fact that reopening would allow for fall programming to begin. Is that intended to mean programming of municipal effect, or is that third-party programming? What exactly is meant by programming in that sense?
Your Worship, I was wondering if we had done. I'm not sure if our acting director is prepared to speak to that level, but I think the idea being is that the facility is open and available for that, and that the programming would be that whatever would fall within that. So I don't know, if Angela, if you're ready to speak to that or not.
Well, the basic question is the earlier discussion about there are some separate clubs to do some of the things. So clearly, gymnastics, dance is independent. But I would have thought that most things are independent. I don't know if there's a squash club that runs its own squash, but I would think that if there's Taekwondo, there would be a Taekwondo club. They would all be clubs that use. So I don't know how we would differentiate between one club and another. And it's just an unfortunate reality that many of these programs occur in a building that also happens to house an arena. But if we're looking at other activities resuming, including the fitness center, the climbing wall, and the aquatic center on September 21st, how can it be that other activities unrelated to an ice surface get captured by the rules or the expectations of when the ice surface will be ready, just because they have a shared roof in some sense. I find it difficult to tell those members of the public that because they happen to be under a common roof, they don't get an opportunity as users under a roof that houses the fitness center and the aquatic center would have. But I'm struggling with the terminology in the report.
In your worship, if I could, that's the intent behind the uniformity of the opening date across the board. It just makes administering this, the availability of the facility for all users, the custodial, the opening and closing of doors, all of that becomes much easier than if we begin to piecemeal and offer different deals. So all I'm asking is that, you know, that's what we put in front of you is a uniform opening approach. The dollar amount, I can talk to council a bit more on what's all involved in that, but it is a reduced service model with some operational changes all within that dollar figure.
Councillor Butler.
Mr. Fritchow has, from a different standpoint, perspective perhaps, really gone to the point that I attempted to raise earlier. These are different times from any times we have ever encountered in any of our experience. We're going to have to reassess, we're going to have to do things differently. The way in which that facility has been used is going to be used, is not going to be able to be the same as the way it was used this time last year. Our ability and even a responsibility to try to attract certain uses like weddings and so on has to be reassessed. I don't think we've actually heard from some of these user groups to say that they're anxious to come back in. It hasn't been reported to us that, for example, darts and taekwondo is trying to get back, is wanting to come back in. I understand that those are important activities within the community, but we have to look for ways to save money. Our income stream has just collapsed because of COVID. It's not because of anything else, it's because of COVID. And so we have to be responsible and try to save money where we can. And I'll reiterate that I just don't find that there's a really very compelling case to open a pretty large facility for really uncertain uses. I don't think we even know yet. We talk about the ice service will be available already at one point. We don't know when that is because we're still in the midst of a project. And beyond that, I don't think we know whether we're going to be able to have hockey the way we used to have hockey, whether we're going to be able to be putting people together in change rooms. I don't think we have any sense of whether we can expect to see demand for outside tournaments. The last report we had is that we don't really know what it looks like yet. So all of these are unknowns, and I just don't see, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't see that reopening this facility is really a high priority at this time, at least until we have a sense of the demand for some of these services. I know council in the past has been accused of just sort of picking a date, but I feel in this case, we're being asked to choose a date where there's no particular rationale for that date, and I think we should be really deeply considering our options and how we want to move forward, as Mr. Fritchow has suggested. But I'd like to see this come back for further conversation in the committee as a whole. I'm not in favor of choosing a date or any particular date at this point.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I also believe that pending our third reading of our masks being compulsory in the municipality of Jasper, that things might change. So up until today, perhaps the user group would assume that they would be going back to their normal activities without masks being used. And maybe the news of the bylaw being introduced to the municipality today changes things. Perhaps having administration request from the user groups that have previously used our facilities, whether or not they intend on resuming and using the facilities. I believe that would be a good first step and information I would be seeking at a future committee of the whole meeting. And also, you know, I think, I'm not sure where this would come from, if it would be Hockey Canada or from minor sports in Jasper, but if we're making masks compulsory in indoor spaces, you know, what does that look like for a hockey player? And I would like to know that information, as I simply just am not sure that I would want to register for dance or hockey or, you know, any fitness or wellness activity being like, I would want to know the information and whether my child or I have to wear a mask for that activity or not. And I think that that might make a difference in the user groups and how they move forward.
Thank you. So where are we at? Mr. Fritcho, in terms of lead time, this is not the same as the aquatic center, for example. So what sort of lead time would administration need to be prepared to open the activity center once council approved that?
Your worship, I guess it would depend on if we're going to change the operational model, is one thing I'd be looking for some feedback on. And secondly, certainly the lead time isn't the same as the pool with the requirements there, but there's the outside user groups, and if we need to provide council with some information of what was just raised, how we as administration quantify that solicitation of information and get that back to you and what that looks like would be something I'm kind of interested in. And then again, I'm not sure if our director of finance or acting director can speak to any of this as well. Just I'm just a little uncertain of what the parameters are. We're talking about opening the fitness center and the pool, and I guess separating the difference here. I think everything that we've talked about applies to both of those facilities as well. So what exactly council would need to look for this facility, and then what that date range might be, or how do we bring that back? So I'm just struggling a little with what would administration bring back to council and when in order to further this conversation.
Councilor DeMoy?
Well, I think that was part of the question I was going to ask. Like, if we don't make the decision today or make any decision today, and we wanted to open it up for September 21st or the 1st of August, I know it was mentioned before, but how much lead time is adequate?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Demota, I think maybe Mr. Furcho is getting some information on his device there, but from conversations with Mrs. McNabb, my understanding is that once we offer a job to someone, so to an employee that's laid off, there's a 15-day period for them to actually accept the offer. And then 1-5, I believe. And then this person may have to give notice at another job that they may have taken in the meantime. So that could possibly add up there, but also the potential that some employees may not return, I think is quite real, especially the part-time people or people that may have moved on to different jobs at this stage. And then if we have to post positions, then this delays by another week or two. And then so just the rehiring process could take up to a month. And then in addition to that, for the aquatic center, as was noted, there's some operational requirements that take more time. So I think those are minimal for the activity center, but it's more so the recall and the prospect that people may not return to their jobs, and then posting those positions is what constitutes the delay there, which I am not an HR professional, but I would suggest that's at least 3 to 4 weeks.
Well, we need to move along. There is a request for a decision for today. Certainly is an option. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor McGrath.
Sorry, Mayor Ireland, you can finish your before I say what I needed to say.
All right, well, thank you. I'm just looking for some direction from council. We can certainly defer. My understanding is that with respect to the other facilities, the fitness center and the aquatic center, we have tentatively confirmed September 1st with a review set for the first meeting in September. So in the absence of any other motion, we could set this over, I suppose, for review at the same time as those other ones in early September, unless somebody wants to make a more concrete motion than that. Councillor Butler?
Thank you. And I would like to suggest that the conversation we do need to have is the one that Mr. Fritcho referenced. We could. I realize that I don't think Mr. Fritcho was suggesting he would like to see council have that conversation, but it is one that if we're going to change our views about how the activity center should be operated, then we should have that conversation. I'm grasping for words that you used, Mr. Fritcho, that to change the operational, help me with what the
Procedures.
The operational procedures, or you know, the protocols around and our expectations around operation of that facility. I think we do need to have that conversation, and it might be appropriate to begin that next week at Committee of the Whole, or I'm not asking that we delay having the conversation, but I am asking that we delay making a decision on an opening date for the facility until we have had that conversation. Because I, for one, feel that we do have to reconsider our expectation of how that facility may need to be operated for some time. And to be fiscally responsible, we should make our opening decision in light of that conversation. And these are the questions that we've tossed around. Should we be marketing our multi-purpose hall, for example, for out-of-town people to come in and have a wedding? Is that something we should be doing now over the next year or not? And that's just one example of the kind of thing that we really ought to be considering, I think, before we just sort of arbitrarily say, well, let's open the doors on this date. So I would be in favor of beginning that conversation next week, and I don't think we need to ask administration to prepare anything for us.
I think that's kind of delving a little deeper than the level of service that we want to provide. I don't know what it takes to operate a facility like that, and I don't even want to pretend it. That's not my job. That's their job. And I'm sorry, I just mean, and when I'm kind of getting into that, I think we're just getting a little too deep over into the minutia of that whole thing. I mean, I know some people want to save money, and I know some people think it's a pertinent expenditure. So I think it's just, to me, that's just too much detail for me to get involved in. I'd rather just look at the finances and say, is this worthwhile opening? Just do the 3 filters again, right? Is this good for the whole community? What are the costs? And is it the right thing to do? So right now, I'm not ready to make a decision because a lot of that, I can't put through a lot of those filters other than what it's going to cost. If that's the only one, then I'm not sure. Is it good for the entire community? I'm not sure. Is it the right thing to do? I'm not sure. So,
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. One question that I would have to council is, does council as a whole have any interest in requesting administration to poll our user groups for information to come back to us at a committee of the whole in the future, where they're asking for is what demand for our service is there? And specifically, and I do respect the point of the multi-purpose Hull competing against commercial enterprise in Jasper, but the demand for service specifically to our user groups. So the past tenants of the municipality of Jasper and the activity center to be asked whether or not they plan on opening their services when the activity center is open, or are they hesitant, or are they waiting for further change? Or I'm seeking that information to make an informed decision.
Thank you for that, Councillor McGrath. And I endorse that. I would like to know that information as well from the potential user groups, whether they're ready to come back. That's a critical piece of information. And perhaps if there is the will of council, we could direct administration to see what they can find out. Councillor Juneau, are you all right with that?
Yeah. Yep.
There. All right. So that. Thank you for raising that, Councillor McGrath. That seems to have consensus, so we can leave that with administration. Mr. Furcho, you had your hand up early, and then I'll go to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to maybe separate some of the conversations. So we've got an unfinished conversation on the Culture and Rec Services and Services Review. So kind of back to what Councillor Butler is saying is, I'd like to have a conversation with council holistically on all of those services we provide for Culture and Rec, for the whole community, for outside user groups, and set that. And it's fair to have some of those conversations enter what do private enterprise provide, what do we provide, like that's part of that conversation. So what we do is certainly council's realm. How we do it typically is administration's realm, as Councillor Demoda was pointing out. So if we could untangle some of these conversations, I think finishing that work might be helpful then to inform then how the facility is operated, which we could do, unless council has some concerns with how we operate the facility, then that just falls back to us again. But there's that piece, I think that's important, that needs to be finished. But, and then, just back to being sensitive to the fact we do need some fairly significant lead time on opening dates when we do choose to open. But now that, Your Worship, you've given us that direction, we can provide that survey results back to you guys as soon as we can get that. Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson.
Well, now that I've heard 3 or 4 people speak, one of my pet peeves is, I agree with you and Jen, or Councillor McGrath as well, but I do. Although I feel that all of these items shouldn't affect the opening date. Yes, we can have that conversation, Councillor Butler, and what are we going to offer in the future, but it doesn't need to be packed into the next two weeks, right? We operate under scaled back hours. We operate as kind of per normal, as much normal as we can. We have that conversation. We kind of revisit Culture and Rec review. We poll our user groups and find out what type of buy-in we're going to have from them. But we don't push it off. We put it for September 1st alongside the pool and the fitness center, and we make the call that day. We make a call at some point, but we don't September 1st, we're talking about the fitness center, we're talking about the pool. Let's put the activity center in that same conversation. And if we want to make changes, we make changes, but we make changes in the future, not underneath a deadline of opening. I think we should detach those two from each other.
All right, so I think put here a suggestion that this matter come back for review of the decision on September 1st with the other ones. In the meantime, if we proceed with the other suggestions, you're comfortable with that. So if we were to add to next week's committee of the whole agenda discussion proposed by Councillor Butler, you're not disagreeing with that. You're just saying let's fix a date when we're going to make this decision. Yeah. Understood. Councillor Butler.
Thanks. I would like to just add one piece, because I understand that user groups, local user groups, will be asked about when they would like to come back and under what circumstances. I would also like to suggest that at that time, I would find it valuable to get, as best we can, an update on what the expectation is around outside hockey tournaments. I realize we won't have a solid answer on that, but I'm just interested in knowing if there are any guidelines from the province for health. Sorry, I'm having trouble putting the words together. But will there be organized junior hockey, for example, happening this fall, this winter? Do we know yet? If we don't know, we don't know. But it might be an additional piece in addition to asking our local user groups. Might be helpful to us.
Mr. Don.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Councillor Butler, I just thought I would share some information that I do know around the current Alberta health guidelines around sporting leagues. And under stage 2, it's limited to 50 per league. So Mrs. McNabb has been referring to those as mini leagues. So sports teams are allowed to compete against each other as long as within that pool of people that end up playing together is no more than 50. So arguably, once you're looking at hockey teams traveling from community to community, it under stage 2 of the provincial relaunch is highly unlikely, I would suggest. But who knows when stage 3 might come or those provincial guidelines may change, but that's the current status and with no sign of change unless we go to stage 3 is my understanding.
So maybe that's the answer right there.
Councillor Journo.
I'm just reading through the Alberta relaunch strategies, and yes, it does mention some limitation. Also mentions that people, hockey players, but participants would have to come pre-dress. Okay, but there'd be limited access to the shower rooms and so on and so forth. I can't find it all that quickly now. There's a whole bunch, but I also could talk about in the fitness center to extend space between equipment, so high activity equipment, treadmills and climbing to 3 meters instead of 2 meters, so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff that's just coming in. But one of the things that they talk about is communicate with your users about COVID-19. That's the first thing. So the opening paragraph still talks about the fact that it's still with us, and that make sure you communicate with your people before you see that there's a real need to be using these things. And when I look at some of these, closing toilets and urinals less than 2 meters apart, blah, blah, blah. Like it's 26 pages. I don't think we're ready for it. I think we can delay until there's more clarification or more details on this. Because a lot of it is implementing, considering. I don't think we're ready for that.
There is, I think now confirmed, the direction, Mr. Virgil, to come back next week at Committee of the Whole with some sort of polling of user groups. I will canvass again, Council, but I think there is consensus that this matter generally can be on the agenda for next week, Committee of the Whole, for a continued discussion about the reopening. And potentially at least, but I will canvass Council again, a third direction that the matter come back at least for reconsideration on September 1st, if that is the date, or whatever that first date in September is, together with the Aquatic Center and Fitness Center discussion. Yes, Mr. Virgil.
Your Worship, if I could, so the Fitness Center was when the financial decision would come back. There has some wheels have to be put in motion, obviously, before that, as we discussed, for staffing purposes. Same with this. September 1st is a little short. We're already well into August. So maybe if we don't put a hard date on that for administration, there might be some stuff that comes to light next week for council that it could return by the meeting after, let's say the 18th, perhaps would be helpful for us. There is just some logistical stuff. September 1st to the 21st doesn't give us a lot of time.
Right, understood and appreciated. Any further comments about this subject matter then? It will come back. It is deferred at least until next week, but the decision is deferred until council is prepared to make a decision. All right, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Sorry for interjecting, Your Worship. I'm going to excuse myself from the rest of this meeting. I have a personal undertaking I need to take care of. So
May I prevail upon you? wait a moment. I want to return now to agenda item 8.2. And of course, if we have certification of the bylaw, if we are going to proceed today with third reading, we need unanimous consent to do so. So I am going to ask somebody, if they're willing, to make a motion that we proceed with third reading of bylaw 228 at today's meeting. Councillor Butler, you're ready to make that motion?
I am, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for reminding me I would not have wanted to miss that.
And as I indicated, in order to carry, this motion needs unanimous consent. So the motion is that we give bylaw number 228 third reading at today's meeting. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. In that case, then I will need a motion from somebody to give third and final reading. Councillor Demota?
I was going to do that, but I thought maybe you wanted to do that. So if you wanted to,
I do not need that notoriety.
Okay.
All right. I have a motion from Councillor Demota that Council give third and final reading to bylaw number 228, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to make compulsory the wearing of face coverings in indoor public places in the town of Jasper. Is there any further debate? Councillor Butler?
Only a question, Your Worship. You've been mayor of the municipality of Jasper for as long as it's been a municipality. Has council ever passed bylaw, given it 3 readings and passed it in one meeting, in your experience?
In my experience, this is a first. And I'd credit to Parks Canada and Superintendent Alan Fair for going an extra distance on our behalf, recognizing the public interest in this matter and the challenges that we would all face if the matter were to have been delayed potentially for 2 weeks, just getting to the unusual structure of our governance agreement. Thank you for bringing that up, and it is unique in my experience to do this in one day. If there's no further debate, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. We now have a compulsory face covering bylaw applicable in the town of Jasper. So thank you all. I just wanted to say, though, as others have indicated throughout the discussion, this is not a panacea. We still need people to wear masks. People still have to take responsibility for themselves. In researching this and considering the implications of mandating masks, I found only one study reported in Health Affairs, a magazine in the United States, where they did a study of infection rates pre and post mandating masks. And they did it they tested the 5 days prior to the legislation with 5-day blocks afterwards. So 1 to 5 days, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and 21 plus. And the maximum impact was the longer time frame, so 21 days plus. The difference in infection rates was statistically significant, but it was only 2%, which tells us that all those other measures are equally important. And the municipality has done what it can to address this. But where we started this conversation was that we're all in this together. We continue to be, everybody still has a role to play. I thought that was extremely interesting statistical information. It's only one study done in the States. 16 states and the District of Columbia were studied. And those were the results. Very surprising to me. So as So not a panacea, but a step in the right direction, for sure. I wanted to thank all those members of the public who contacted us. We won't be dealing specifically with the letters, but they were received and council appreciate all of that. So thank you all for that. We are done now with agenda item 8.2 and can move over on to 9.4, and Councillor Butler must leave us, but thank you for your contributions today.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor DeMotte.
I was just wondering if whatever Councillor Butler has to attend to, that just asking him if he needs assistance, because I could provide, I could leave as well if you need help in whatever you need to take care of.
My personal matter is beginning a short holiday. So no, I don't think it's something you can assist me with. But thanks for the help.
Wanted to help.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, agenda item 9.4, a request for decision and a request for waiver of notice to approve an additional net deficit of $9,000 to provide additional hours for custodial services for the Connaught washrooms and the log cabin washrooms. Mr. Furcho, are you presenting this?
Your worship, yes. So the I'm going to have our acting director of culture rec, Angela Franklin, here present, just for council's information. Is the there has been discussion around businesses and whatnot being down in some sectors across the municipality, but we're certainly experiencing a much higher than normal demand on our services for some of the things we provide to the traveling and visiting population, and so we're struggling with some of that. And today we're going to talk specifically around this one service. So I'll just leave that. Angela, if you could present just a little overview on this one, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. Currently, we only have 2 janitorial staff working 8 hours per day with coverage 7 days per week. The facilities they're responsible for cleaning on a daily and bi-weekly basis include the Activity Center, Administration Office, Wildflowers Childcare, Emergency Services Building, Operational Services, Downtown Washrooms, Log Cabin Washrooms, and the Library and Cultural Center. Certain facilities have time restrictions on them as to when they can be accessed for cleaning based on use and operational hours. Wildflowers Childcare needs to be cleaned in the morning before the facility opens. The administration office is cleaned at noon, and the curling lounge must be cleaned after 6 p.m. daily once the out-of-school care is out of there. Granting this request would allow the municipality of Jasper to keep the log cabin washrooms open later each day, and it would allow the service to extend to include weekends. Recalling a staff member to work for 12 hours per day would fit within the allowable hours for staff currently claiming the CERB. So no issues are anticipated for recalling a staff member. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Any questions from councillors? If council wishes to proceed, we need first a notice or a motion to waive notice. Councillor Wilson? A motion to waive notice so that this matter can be considered at today's meeting. Is there any debate on that? All in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. And can we have then a motion, Councillor Keller-Harrenty? And I take it your motion would be that council approve an additional net deficit of $9,000 to provide additional hours for custodial services for the Connaught washrooms and the log cabin washrooms. Any debate? Ready for the question? All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for bringing that forward. Agenda item 9.5, council correspondence policy. That is here just for notice. I don't see a formal request, but it's not time limited. we're not requested to make a decision at any particular time. This is just here for continuing information, not for decision, correct?
It is here for notice, Your Worship, in terms of we can continue business as usual, even if we don't have a new policy between now and 2 weeks from now. So in that sense, we didn't feel the need to ask for waiver of notice. But the document that's on the agenda package reflects Council's discussion at the last committee of the whole meeting and our attempt to capture those changes in the policy statement itself. And I just think it's a much better policy than what we had before, and we've started using some of those filters even though it's not in place yet. So as long as Council is aware that that's the intent and that's the direction we're moving into, this could come back if there's more input at the next committee of the whole meeting. But if Council is somewhat satisfied with the edits that you see here, you could only see this back in 2 weeks for approval.
On behalf of Councillor Butler, who had to leave but was interested in this, he simply conveyed to me that with respect to the respectful workplace reference in the policy itself, which we discussed a week or so ago, his thought was that rather than reference general principles outlined in a different document, it might be preferable to simply list those principles on their face in this document. The way it is now, for somebody to understand this policy, they then have to reference a different policy. But I think the wording in the respectful workplace policy is not so cumbersome that it couldn't be listed here. So a suggestion of this. So I'm just on his behalf going to propose that perhaps that could be considered and we could review this at committee of the whole next week. Again, just for the ease of the public, if they want to understand our correspondence policy, have it all contained in one document and not require them to look at this one, but then go to another one to understand what the general principles are. Only a comment. And I have to say that I would have to myself look at the municipality's respectful workplace policy to understand this policy. Maybe that's not the best approach. Is Council content with that? Just very briefly for next week. Ms. Nadal?
Thank you, Your Worship. And this would also give us an opportunity to further research when Council receives correspondence for information, consideration, or action, and what Council can and can't do at Committee of the Whole and regular meeting was a discussion we had at the last Committee of the Whole, but the events of last week prevented me from doing additional research there. So that's also a piece that's outstanding to return to Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. Most, if not all, I guess all of the correspondence related to the mask issue, or as we have termed it, temporary compulsory face coverings. And the difference in wording is intended to, in fact, draw a distinction between us and other communities. Councils can mandate, but when it becomes compulsory, it is more directed, I think, and it implies something different about the serious nature of the problem and the serious to which Council has engaged on this issue. So somewhat different, but with a reason. And I think that the breadth of our motion in terms of public spaces also sets us far apart from any other municipality in the country. I think that we have effectively dealt with our entire community in one fashion or another, which is far beyond what any other community has done. I thank you all for your efforts in that regard. That takes us to agenda item 11.
Sorry, sir.
That's right.
Point of order. I just wanted to address that there were some late letters that came in that probably around the same time as other ones, but they just didn't make it to the agenda. I just want to let the people know that if they were expecting to see their names here or their letters, that you know, their letters were received and read, and I just wanted to thank them for getting those in.
Thank you for that observation. Agenda item 11, new business. Is there other new business for council? Councilor DeMota?
Very talkative today. I would like to just bring up now for committee of the whole for a discussion next week on the proclamation for Jasper Day. I just didn't want that to fall off the radar. And as we were looking for some day in September, I'd like to have some discussion on that with the group, and then maybe move towards solidifying something at our next regular meeting, whether it's in the way of a motion or sorry, a waiver, or the moving it for a couple of weeks. But September's coming up on us quickly, and I think if we're going to make a proclamation and having something to look forward to at the end of summer, I think it'd be pertinent to get on it soon. I'll have some information on that and people that I talk to in the community.
I'm going to invite you to speak to staff a bit. It seems to me that our last proclamation was welcoming and inclusive community, but did we not thereafter cease making proclamations structurally? I understand where you're going, but technically I'm not sure that we position ourselves with respect to proclamations. I can't remember the details of that policy or bylaw right now, but Ms. Nadon perhaps can.
My recollection is that council can still proclaim, but we've tightened the guidelines around what is eligible for proclamations because we were receiving several requests. And I do believe that an initiative that's internal to the municipality does qualify. And as it is being brought up by a councillor, I would suggest that that's what it would fall under. But certainly, Councillor DeMota, if you have anything in writing you'd like to provide for the agenda, and I'm not suggesting something lengthy, but you know, if there was something for council to consider over the weekend as we approach the next committee of the whole, and we could confirm the status of this proclamations policy to be sure that that's an avenue that's actually available to us, which I believe it is, but we could confirm that. And so I invite you to perhaps reach out to myself later this week.
Is there other new business for council? Mr. Furcho, there was a comment earlier today about revenue streams or cash flow. I don't want to burden administration unnecessarily, but when might it be convenient for council to be apprised of response to tax payments? Typically, I mean, even though we've deferred taxes would otherwise have been due July 15th, and I'm just interested, and certainly before September, because we agreed in March to defer until at least September. So sometime before September, I would appreciate if council could get the information about where we stand now, the percentage of those on the tax roll who have paid against those who have chosen to defer, and whether we should be looking at a further deferral. We just recognized in March that there was going to be an issue, and we, not entirely fire in the dark, but we didn't have any sense of how the recovery might go, and so we chose September. But I would like to reconsider that on the basis of some evidence before September. So I'm not suggesting that it be pulled together for next week, but perhaps as soon as possible, and at least before September, because I think we have an obligation to go back and look at the deferral that we granted and where we stand on it.
Your Worship, I believe we could probably talk about that next week. Our Director of Finance is bringing a report back, as I said, with positive news on both operational and capital grant funding. And just in the conversations I've had, don't quote me, but I believe the uptake on the deferrals is very low. And most people chose just to pay the taxes this year. And we know that. I don't know that there's any problem just providing that next week.
Thank you for that. Is there any other new business? Councillor reports? Councillor Demota?
I just wanted to let my fellow councillors know that I was accepted in my application. Well, it was just a matter of the amount of room for a course on council's role in public engagement. And it's something that the elected officials education program put on in light of the onset of COVID and the stress that went for councillors and elected officials to deal with. And I missed on the first round because there was a high demand for that. So I asked right away to get put on a waiting list and just to be considered for the next round. So they take place every Thursday at 2:30, starting on the 13th of August for Thursdays. So they're 2 hours long, which I'll give you updates when it happens, and I'm looking forward to attending.
Thank you. I will report, I hope briefly. Wednesday of last week, I met with the Mayor of Drumheller, who was vacationing in our community, but thought it important from her perspective to reach out and get a better understanding of how we deal with tourism, and more particularly, how we deal with the expense of serving a visitor population who doesn't pay any taxes. So, a topic familiar to all of us. And she's very interested in the discussion, and I've offered to bring her up to speed over time with our collaborative efforts with our friends in Banff and Canmore and our approach to that. But Drumheller is feeling the similar impacts that we feel, probably to a lesser extent, but still the same principle. And so we have another ally in the province, and I thought that was very important. On July 31st, I met with the Consul General for the Philippines. He is stationed in Calgary and is responsible for consular services for about 175,000 Filipinos who are spread throughout Alberta, principally in Calgary and Edmonton, but a significant cohort of them here, 300 to 350. So had a very nice meeting with him here on Friday. And today, and I apologize that I was sworn to secrecy, but I was, and so I observed those requirements. But there was a round table hosted locally today, a tourism roundtable attended by Premier Jason Kenney, Minister Tanya Furr, and our MLA Martin Long, with myself and 11 other industry representatives from local business. So we met for, well, we extended beyond the hour that was slated, but the Premier is quite engaged in our issue in the tourism industry. It was an opportunity for myself and for others in the room to apprise him of local circumstances and the challenges that we're all facing. He and Minister Furr seemed very receptive. I focused on one of the recommendations from the tourism industry of Alberta, report calls for action. There are numerous recommendations in that, but one of those recommendations is that the Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Tourism, Minister Furr, be appointed as the minister responsible for engagement on national park issues and for advocacy. And I suggested that would be a recommendation that might be opportune for the Premier to appoint Minister Furr to that position. And I think that it is being considered. for all the issues that we have that relate to our local sustainability, many of them attached to our federal relationship. So there is certainly an opportunity, if that appointment is made, that we can engage with Minister Furr on a number of important issues that have always been challenging for our community. So I left that meeting with a high degree of optimism that again, we may have a stronger ally in the province in these challenging times than we've ever had before. So it's a very worthwhile meeting this morning. That is it for my reports. If there are no other reports, we have upcoming events listed, but nothing itemized. And we had a request to move in camera to discuss legal issue enforcement in particular. So could I have a motion from someone that council move in camera at 5:01 p.m. Councillor Trudeau. Thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed, so we will move in camera. For those who are interested in re-engaging with us afterwards, there is a link on our agenda, and you can email Ms. Bird to be apprised of when we come out of camera, and then you can join back in again. Otherwise, I will call a very brief recess, and then we will reconvene the in-camera portion. Thank you to all of the public for all of the letters we received, for your engagement today, watching our proceedings, and well, enjoy what's left of what started out as a really nice day. I can't see if the sun's shining any longer down here. Go enjoy while you can. Thank you all.